I'd like to move back into, a motion to move back into open session.
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Then the first item on the agenda is public appearances, and I see 5 here. Are there any others? Okay, let me just remind you that you'll be allotted 3 minutes apiece, and we'll try to let you know if it looks like it's a good idea if you have a minute, that you have a minute left. So otherwise, I'll just call you in the order that I have them here. So the first speaker would be Peter Kuzma on consideration of the Studer Consulting Group.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Peter Kuzma. I live at 4207 Winco Road. I'm a teacher in the district. This is my 20th year teaching. I'm also a parent of 2 students in the district, and I'm a community member. And I just want to start out by saying that reflecting on the initiative to look at a strategic planning group, the Studer Group, as one option, I'm going to hark back to something that happened a year ago. I was really pleased to be part of the collaboration group and the meeting that happened at the community center last year, towards the end of the year, where over 140 parents and students and teachers from the district got together to talk about how much they recognize the value of collaboration and community and looking at what we can all bring to the table in a meaningful way to make our district strong and make our work here really shine and be the best that it can be. 2 weeks ago, I also attended the presentation made by the Studer reps that were taking place downstairs here. And I was really glad to see active and thoughtful questions by board members. There were lots of questions that cropped up in my mind as I watched that we didn't have the opportunity necessarily to present. Questions just about how some of the numbers and statistics and ideas that the rep was bringing up were framed. And those are things that I've discussed at some points with different people, including some board members. But some of my biggest questions that I wanted to just pose, and my goal here is to just pose some questions to you and then let you kind of throw those questions back and forth at each other a little bit more, is what their definition of a stakeholder in the district is, or what it means to them. When I think of a district stakeholder, I'm thinking about all those people that were at the collaboration event last year. Teachers and parents and students. And I question what is the purpose of necessarily starting with a new group when, having worked with Matthew Fail just fairly recently, the fact that people on staff in our own district have more years of experience in education, obviously, than the Studer Group themselves, and also a much better understanding of the district history and politics and needs and culture. I think that there are people among us here that have the chops to do this. And I think that we could very easily really establish a stronger culture. I think we already have a strong culture of continual improvement and creating of a strategic plan that will carry us forward in a really positive way without necessarily needing to look to a group that doesn't necessarily understand us as well as we do. Thank you very much. I realize that I may have run over a bit.
Thanks, Peter. I'm just going to give you that announcement. Thanks, Peter. Okay, next we have Erin Bibb, who will also talk about strategic planning. And thank you also, Peter, for giving your name and address, because I forgot to say that you're supposed to do that. So, Erin, if you'll give us your address as well.
He can have my 15 seconds from the end of mine. I'm Erin Bibb. I live at 6004 Ridgewood Avenue. I'm the proud parent of a Winnequa owl. And a community member, obviously. I would also like to ask the board to take a long look at the value that an outside group from Florida can bring to strategic planning for the district. I would echo Mr. Kuzma's comments about the value of collaboration in the district. I'm new to the district, only having been here 2 years, but I've already been really impressed by the level of community outreach from the educators, from the board members, from the administration. And I think that that's a real asset that can be brought to strategic planning. And especially knowing the cost of some of these outside groups and knowing that they don't come in with the experience that all of these concerned groups in our community have, I would just echo that starting with those resources makes sense to me, especially considering money that could otherwise be spent more directly towards classroom education. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jeremy Wallace, also speaking about the student group.
Good evening. Jeremy Wallace, 1820 Keyes Avenue, Madison. Teacher in the district for 14 years and MGA co-president for the last 3 years. I'm also here tonight to ask you to vote against the hiring of the Studer Group. I think our concerns have been outlined to you as a board. After researching for over 6 months the results in education and watching the Studer presentation, I'm not convinced that this is a good fit for us. We have a long history of collaboration in this district. Peter referenced the community collaboration event, which I was actually going to reference too. Of the 140 people that were there, I think they sent a clear message to the board that they were eager to be engaged in the decision-making process. I find little evidence that a Florida-based group that has no one on the ground in Wisconsin is going to help us improve student achievement. I expect that they will come into the community and show that they want to work with key stakeholders by having a few listening sessions to say that they received input before moving forward, and perhaps they will check in with key groups from time to time. I think we all know that this is not true collaboration. I would hope that the board would vote no on this plan and move forward with a plan that involves all stakeholders. While it's easy to say the district wants the involvement of outside experts to guide our process, we believe these resources would be far better spent engaging all stakeholders. Why not, at least, try the process with local stakeholders before hiring Studer? A second and larger concern we have is a trend of more resources leaving the classroom in the last year. The board added close to $1 million to our budget last spring, with a large percentage of that money not impacting students directly. We have also outsourced our bus drivers and substitute teachers. We have also hired a communications consultant from the Fond du Lac area and hired Verisight to assist in the new teacher compensation committee. We have also hired a group out of Ohio to write our policies, and now we are set to hire a group from Florida to write our strategic plan. I'm told we are also looking at hiring an insurance consultant and long-term facilities consultant. The list goes on and on. In the last year, it seems like we have largely dropped the community from our community schools. While I appreciate your service to the district, I'm concerned that those of you who continue to vote yes on the outsourcing of our education are losing touch with your constituents and the people that work in the district. I anticipate this issue will play a key role in the spring elections. I hear repeatedly from members who want a larger voice and greater participation in decisions like this. When we work together, the district has a tremendous record of problem solving. However, I can't think of any positive solutions brought to us from out-of-state consultants. Please vote no to this proposal. If we want to make this a lighthouse district, as Dean Bowles has suggested in the past, you should be working more closely with key stakeholders. Thank you for your time.
Okay, next, Tracy Ellingson, and a few topics.
It is ugly sweater day, just making that disclaimer, especially since it's videotaped. My name is Tracy Ellingson. I live at 3187 North Star Road in Cottage Grove. Dear Superintendent Dan Olson and the Monona Grove School Board members, I have 4 emotions as I sit here tonight and read my letter. Love, anger, sadness, and fear. Love for my MGS district kids and families that I teach, and love for my coworkers. Anger and sadness for what is happening to this amazing district, and fear. I'm afraid to be actually telling you, Mr. Olson, and the school board members, with the exception of 2 of you, how I feel and how I see this district falling apart. Talking is extremely hard for me to do, but it's time I stood up for my own children and the district and the students who are like my own. I'm going to have to skip around because I know 3 minutes won't be enough. I grew up in Wanakee. I played MG since I was in high school. They were a class act back then. They're a class act now. I started teaching here in 1999, and my kids go here. All 3 of my girls go here, and they have had the most amazing teachers. I am sad and fearful that the MGSD that I have known and loved for 31 years is deteriorating. There are so many things that are going wrong on this district that are negatively affecting the children and staff. Here are my biggest concerns. The morale for many staff members that I deal with on a daily basis is at an all-time low. The biggest complaint is the district upper management is not listening to us. We are in the trenches with our students every day, and we know what is best for them. We feel that no one is listening or valuing our years of education in the trenches. You also need to ask the people that are in the trenches about the what's and whys to what is going on in the district. One example is testing. Do you have any idea how incredibly hard it is to give a 5th grade reading test to a 5th grader reading at a 2nd grade level and tell them they have to take it? Until you see every ounce of self-worth get sucked out of their face, you have no idea how incredibly wrong and harmful that is. And just kind of a side note, the training we got for that was 4 hours. That is it. I have to skip my next two because I don't have enough time. Concerns at Cottage Grove School, no recess, lunch concerns, complaints about principals. The school's TOSA hasn't been there since September. The TOSA that is no longer there is one of our most highly thought of teachers. She is looked up upon as being a strong leader for our district. She is often asked to run professional developmental training for teachers. She is loved by her students. I don't know how many times I've seen her at basketball games picked as a favorite teacher from former students. She's worked hard over the summer to get things ready. The teachers love her, appreciated her, and miss her. They are sad she is gone. I'm wondering, why is she gone? You say you're fiscally responsible. That was your highest mark on your perceptions test from that Studer group. How can you say that? The number of district upper management positions that to continue to be created is crazy. You are so top heavy in the district office, and there has been no relief felt underneath you. How can just this week you posted the TOSA position at CG school. Where is that money coming from? How can the district even begin to look outside our district to hire another consultant when we have so many capable people in our district? There are so many other things that this district could use that money for. Please please vote against the Studer company and help and let us work on our strategic plan. I love Monona Grove. I love being a teacher. In Monona Grove, I love that my kids are students in this district, but I'm angry, sad, and afraid about where this district is headed. Please start listening and asking the staff what is best for our school, and start listening and asking the parents what is best for their child. Thanks.
Next is Sierra Zimbrick. And I apologize if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. Also speaking about Cottage Grove School and the Studer Group.
Hi, my name is Sierra Zimbridge. I live at 202 Michelle Lane in Cottage Grove. I have 4 kids who go to each one of the Monona Grove schools, and I tell anybody who will listen to me and everybody how awesome our schools are. And I'm not one of those bored housewives that is here because I have nothing better to do. I'm not here because I'm a drama queen and I want to stir the pot. I'm here because I want answers. I want voices heard. And that lady that was just up here, you could never pay her enough. Like, the effect that she's had on 2 of my boys, immeasurable. So I would hope that as a board, whatever she says and your teachers say, you would take to heart. There was some drama that broke out on Facebook yesterday, which that's what Facebook's for. And
although let me just caution you that personnel matters should not be addressed on
it won't be. Nope.
Here. Okay.
Nope. And that's exactly.
Okay.
I'm just going to read what my post was because pretty much it says everything. It says, "Good morning. After the post yesterday reached CGS, I launched my own investigation, and I encourage all of you to do the same. There is strength in numbers, and more importantly, there is freedom in knowledge," which is exactly why I'm here. I apologize for the length of this, but there's a lot of stuff going on in our schools and our district. Here are some things I learned. Cottage Grove School is the only school in the district who have done away with the extra recess. It doesn't seem like a big deal. It's only 15 minutes, but it is. There are kids who have specials in the morning, lunch at 10:30, and then are expected to sit wiggle-free and pay attention from 11 to 2:40 during core instruction at the age of 9 to 10. I'm an adult. I couldn't sit there that long. The teachers know that these kids can't sit there that long. There's a breakdown somewhere. Beginning after break, kids will have assigned tables and seats for lunch within their classrooms. School isn't social hour. I get that. Loud and clear. However, having had a child who needed that social piece to thrive, this is important. He didn't always have friends in his classroom. He had friends in other classrooms. You take that one piece away from him, And I mean, and he has teachers in this room that dealt with him. You take that social piece away from him, he falls apart. He's in high school now, so that doesn't apply to him. But it applies to other kids that are at that building, so. So you take away your recess and now socialize it with their friends at lunch. The thought is that this will speed up the lunch line process, giving kids more time to eat. Which brings me to number 3. There's enough overlap in the schedule that 2nd and 4th graders can take all the time they need to finish their lunches once outside dismissal happens. 2nd grade eats last, and there's 20 minutes in between 4th and 3rd. However, 3rd grade has 5 minutes between their lunch ending and 2nd grade starting. Meaning, if your child gets through the line with 5 minutes to eat and has only eaten a third of their lunch and is still hungry, oh well, they have to go outside. This literally hurts my heart. And I told Tracy this for the first time the other day. I grew up in foster care for a semester and a half in high school. I never had to worry about lunch money, having enough to eat, being hungry. My 2nd semester of my junior year, I'm thrust into a situation where whatever I had in the morning had to last me until supper because there was an overlap with the free and reduced lunch being in foster care. I failed my junior year of chemistry because I sat there starving and I couldn't pay attention. Unless you've been in that position, you seriously cannot think. And that was the end of the day. I was in high school. Some of these kids only get hot
Running
lunch.
short of time, just to warn.
Okay. So you get that. Like, some of these kids only get hot lunch. That's it, until they get home. The stutter group, this has been done in districts close to us. One as close as Janesville, which is where I grew up. It worked there. It's not working now. It's not working. The morale, teachers are fighting amongst themselves, amongst buildings. It's pitted that school district against each other. Don't let that happen here. And the last thing, there's standardized testing like Tracy had mentioned. I haven't had a single standardized test tell me something that I didn't know about my child, but more importantly, their teacher didn't know about their child. And in fact, there's stuff that those teachers knew about my kids that no test would ever tell them. I'm not sure why this district has made such a huge focus on standardized testing. I would wonder, is it to pad numbers and statistics and get more money? I don't know. But my kid is a child. Not a test score, not a statistic, not a way to further someone else's professional agenda. The start times are horrendous. I know you started that. It's awful. To get kids, I have kids at all 4 buildings.
Again, please try to wrap this up if you have a list of bullet points. So you can also follow up with an email if that's.
Well, I tried to call, and I haven't gotten a return phone call back, so that's why I'm here.
Sorry, I didn't hear your message.
So that's it. And the morale. Like, I'm not going to bring up personnel issues, but I think that you guys here need to deal with some of that.
Thank you. And again, emails are always good follow-ups if you feel like you don't have enough time here. You also need to know that statutorily we can't engage in conversation about things that you brought up here that aren't on our agenda. The Studer Group is, but none of the rest of this was. So just so you're aware of that it doesn't mean we're not hearing you if we don't address the concerns that were brought up tonight. All right, then we will move on to the consent agenda. I would ask for approval of the consent agenda. Second?
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Then we will go on to, I should have actually just mentioned a couple things. One is that we will resume in closed session following this meeting. The other is that I'd like to, unless there's objection from the board, move the first item under new business, discussion and possible approval of new high school course proposals. I would like to move that up ahead of unfinished business. We'll go through our board reports first, but then move that up ahead of unfinished business because we have a number of staff people here to speak to those, and I'd rather them not have to sit through our first unfinished agenda item discussion prior to their presentation, if that's okay. I don't know if I made that so unclear that you didn't follow, but we'll do the board reports and then we'll follow with the course.
The other thing I'm concerned about on the timing is, and there may be some reports that you really need, like this month or something, but I was also looking at the board reports. It may be that we could defer those to the,
I think people have planned to give those, and there's no reason to really not go through those now, so. Okay, so the next agenda item then is correspondence and announcements. I have a couple. I'll mention the correspondence. I also want to give some shout outs to the music department. As always, and some of you may have been able to attend some of the concerts too. I went to the Glacial Drumlin one last night and Winnequa today, and I have to say, every time I do, I'm extremely impressed with what our staff is able to do in very short amounts of time. And so congratulations to them on some wonderful concerts. It was a nice way for me to relax too and enjoy the kids and see what this is all about, as always. Regarding correspondence, we have had several pieces of correspondence, 12 emails related to the Studer Group, plus several back and forth with the MGEA leadership, 6 from teachers, 6 from community members, some former teachers, all basically raising some of the concerns about the Studer Group that you heard tonight. In general, that was the gist of most of those, and you've seen those. I'm just kind of saying that for public knowledge. And that's all I had. Do other people have other announcements or?
I made tonight.
Okay. Then we'll move on to administrative reports and superintendent's report.
And I have no special report tonight.
Okay. Then we are on to board reports. So the first report is the Monona Grove Education Foundation report.
I
Susan.
thought, didn't you add administrative report?
We just did that, but we don't have any. So we're moving on.
Basically, and I posted a report on board docs, reports and announcements, the John Clement Memorial with the Gerke matching funds is now over $15,000, which is wonderful. And again, remembering that the money that comes into the Monona Grove Education Foundation is used for our staff and our students. They reported out on the Eat Out for Education. They're still working on the different restaurants. The gala review there was an incredibly positive response to the evening, specifically to the teacher grant presentations, and the people that were there who had the opportunity to see them. They were absolutely excellent. And we had several people there, didn't necessarily come enthusiastically to go to a roast, even though to know Mike Stassi used to want to be there. And the teacher grant summaries were just absolutely excellent, and everybody was really excited about that. We'll get a final update on the funds, but it looks positive. And then the grants for the Monona Grove Education Foundation are due December 31st, so we really want you to submit a grant. And to the best of my knowledge, Dan, would you confirm this? There was only one.
As of today, yes.
So, I mean, get on it. Come on, okay.
Then the next report will be Personnel Committee, Jessica?
The Personnel Committee met on Tuesday, January 9th with a meet and confer at 5:30 and a 6:30 bargaining session. We continued our conversations with the MGEA.
Next item, Long Range Facilities Planning Committee, Dean.
Yes, the Long Range Facilities Planning, we intend to have a committee with community members and staff, but right now it's the board that met, and I think the report that we gave last time isn't substantially changed, but we're looking to have 8 to 9 voting members on the committee, including 5 or 6 public members, and hopefully 1 or 2 will have some experience with construction and building and so forth. And we're going to have representatives from Monona and Cottage Grove, hopefully the children in school. The committee met, and we decided on an initial 7 or 8, and we will have a meeting set up pretty soon as the 9th one calls in and confirms that they will in fact be on the committee. We'll have staff support. And the charge is, you've had that before. We're going to be dealing with all sorts of population projections, enrollments, and that sort of thing. Dan, it might be interesting maybe to put this online someplace, and because I think the charge on there is useful for people. And unlike a lot of our recent committees, at least the ones that I've been on, that seem to start and never end, this one, we hope to start hopefully the second week in January, and then hopefully wrap it up in June. And we'll be dealing with land usage, remodeling, use of schools, elementary grade alignments, and all those things that affect space and that sort of thing. So if you put this up on the board, it'll be fine. Right now, the members, we have myself, Chair, Jeff Simpson, Lionel Norton, Carrie Robbins, you're here tonight. You said yes. John Weinberger, who served on the board and has a lot of construction background. Harvey Potter, who is on the village board and also on their planning commission. This has been recommended. And Mary O'Connor, and we're going to try to get at least one or two more with children in the community and that sort of thing. If you have any other suggestions.
Rebecca is, right? Didn't Rebecca say yes?
Yes, Rebecca Ninke, too. Yes, I wrote this before Rebecca responded. Okay, I apologize. I'll get this caught up with, so we'll get that done. So that's it. I'll send you a clean copy.
Okay. And I noticed you have a pretty aggressive meeting schedule twice a month. Here, glutton for punishment, Dean.
Well,
That's good.
I want to see
It's
if
the
we
only way
can
you'll get
end
done by
on a date
That's right.
determined and not forever.
Very good. All right, the next item is the Change Leadership Forum, and that was attended by Dean and Susan. Do you have comments on that, or that you want to share?
I can just do a quick summary. It was actually an excellent meeting. I would have encouraged, in fact, I encouraged several of you to go to that. It was about continuous improvement, and it was taught by three individuals. One was a gentleman from Gallup who basically talked about process and innovation. One was a reflective period, which was also excellent. And then one was implementation results. The reflections were actually taught by a gentleman by the name of Terry Potter, who implemented continuous improvement in this community, whether you see it as healthcare, being totally separate from education or not. When you talk about reflections, you talked about big picture things that happened to this community, to patients in this community, to people in the emergency room, to implementation of the electronic record, and to strategic planning and how that benefits each and every single individual in the community. So that was interesting to hear. And he did it as a reflection. Now, this is what I've learned, and this is what's important. And if you've ever had any contact with him, he's a person that's very quietly and hugely respected for his work in this community. The other individual that spoke that was incredibly impressive was Joanne Strinke, who's superintendent at Pewaukee in the Pewaukee School District, and she has been a firm believer in continuous improvement for over 10 years, probably longer than that. She's a lady who does the thing every day, looks at herself in the mirror and says, oh my gosh, I can do a better thing today than I did yesterday. And that's how we live continuous improvement. And that's what people like Tracy do every day. But she specifically talked about the process. And if you don't have a systemic process, and Mr. Kuzma and I have talked about this extensively, if you don't have a systemic process and somebody that understands it, believes it, and can come in and do it in a non-biased, objective, reflective manner. And we actually talked about who could do that in a school district and how they do it now. Then what you do is once you get the expertise of the person you know and trust, and that's something we're going to talk about tonight, then you basically look at training your internal people so then you can do it. But for instance, I have a mock, one of the questions we ask publicly was, we have a Malcolm Baldridge examiner sitting in this room right now who's incredibly highly talented. Am I going to pull that person out for a week to do the kind of work that we all want done instead of leading the high school? Those are the questions you have to answer as you look at community and internal involvement. And those are the things that Joanne Strinke talked about in her process and her systematic approach. So, and Dean has very graciously, like the reflection section, added lessons from the Leadership Forum.
Yeah, when Susan and I both went and heard all three speakers. They were all very good and interesting. My factor was is that I thought they were so good. If we had two of them and more time for Q&A, involvement, it would have probably been better. I think because of the Joanne Sternke dealing with schools, I thought that was one valuable one, but Potter I think was the other most principally one. However, I sat down and I wrote down I always write this down when I go to a talk or something. What are the takeaways? The first takeaway is there's peril in not planning, changing, adapting, and however you want to call that, strategic or not. It's a necessary function. Number two comes through all of this is change and transformation requires a preservation of, particularly I should have put positive values on this, that exist within an organization, identifying those. But the most important thing that came through, whether it was business or medicine or education, that a culture of trust in the organization is vital and fragile. And I think it was Sternke that indicated that it was the mortar that binds all, that all plans together. Change and innovation must emanate from collaboration and the collision of ideas across this landscape. And success comes through, I came away from it, nobody used the term, not leadership, but team leadership. And the foundation of continuous improvement, which is the Baldrige theme and concept, serve the stakeholders and children. It lies with whether the business people used employees, and I think the fellow from Gallup used customers, and Sternke used teachers, but it was all the people who make it happen at the grassroots. That the foundation for continued lies in, I put teachers that serve stakeholders, and but maintaining a customer focus. My conclusion is that both strategic planning and continuous improvement lie in the domains of values, trust, collaboration, team leadership, and involvement of our teachers. So I hope that's a decent thought piece.
That's very good thought, and very appropriate for our agenda.
If you can't get it on one, I planned it that way.
You got it, it's very good.
Yeah. And
All right,
you can't get it on one side of one sheet of paper. It's usually not worth putting down.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, then, as I mentioned, we're going to jump ahead to the first item of new business, then we will go up to unfinished business and then go back to new business. So the first item will be, the next item will be discussion and possible approval of new high school course proposals. And Dan, I'll let you move that on. Bringing people up here. Okay.
Sure. We have, in your board docs, you'll see a written recommendation for a number of new high school course proposals. So our high school principal, Paul Ross, as well as our different section, Andrew Riddell, will go through those, as well as I believe we have a number of teachers here to talk about their individual departments as well. So.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a number of courses that I'm recommending adoption for this coming school year, as recommended by Principal Brost and his staff. They are Advanced Placement Physics 1, Advanced Placement Physics 2, Advanced Placement Language and Composition, Gothic and Horror Literature, and my memo says Introduction to Computer Science. I'm sorry, that should be Exploring Computer Science, and then Pharmacology. AP Science is, in particular, is a topic that's been of conversation for a number of years in the district, and College Board has done quite a bit of revision in the AP structure and requirements, and our teachers are impressed with those revisions and are recommending that we move in the direction of AP Physics. Excuse me. So those are the courses we're proposing. You see preliminary cost estimates there. I just want to emphasize that the cost estimates themselves are preliminary, and that we would offer courses contingent upon, obviously, board approval first, and then enrollment and funding in the 2015-16 budget. We can't budget for the classes until they're approved, of course, so that's why we're bringing them forward at this time. Dr. Brost?
Yeah, if you want to just proceed through the list, kind of from top to bottom, that Andrew put in front of me, the summary sheet, and we do have staff from the high school here to answer any questions you might have. The Advanced Physics, AP Physics 1 and 2, is coming from the science department, obviously. John Willauer and Juan Botea have worked on that, have gone to the training. And we'll have that ready to go next year if it's approved. John's here tonight to answer any questions. The AP Physics 1 would be offered junior level, where we require all our juniors to take physics. It would be an option for them to take regular physics or the AP Physics, and we would not have the honors physics. We currently have 2 levels of physics, and the AP would take place of the honors. But students would elect into there. They wouldn't be placed in there based on standardized scores. And the Advanced Physics 2 is for senior year and would be a senior elective. It is a full year course that students could take. We have an Advanced Physics course now. I believe it's a semester, but that would take a full year. That'd be in place as well. And students who took honors physics this year, others could take it too, but it would mostly target that group if they wanted to take another year of physics. Physics has just been redone by AP recently, and they did, their recommendation was to put it over 2 years in terms of the curriculum. They've tried to make it more skills-based and less concept. But any questions you have about that, I'd be happy to try and answer, and John can answer any details regarding the curriculum.
Dean?
What's the difference between honors and AP?
Honors right now, we have 2 levels of science and biology, chemistry and physics. We have honors, and we place students in those based on their standardized scores and where we think their skill levels are. We really try to sort them out by skill bands. They cover very similar, the same content, but kids are, to try to stretch students, we have them in different skill levels. The AP really will, and the honors is focused on skills, and our staff have developed the honors physics course. This AP will really obviously follows the AP curriculum and is designed to prepare students for the AP test. And so John could answer in terms of difference of coverage, but there will be a little bit difference of coverage, but it'll really, obviously the syllabus for that has to be approved by AP, and students can then take the advanced placement test for college.
And they could take the advanced placement
They can now.
test with just the honors class, but this gives them
Right.
presumably a little bit better
Did I
preparation.
misstate,
Is that-
John?
Well, the honors class, we don't cover the same material
Okay.
in the current honors class, so I would not recommend the
Students
students
try it,
take the
right.
AP after that.
Okay, right. And we have 2 sections right now of honors?
We have 3 sections
Three
of honors
sections,
this year, each with 29, 30, and 30 students.
That's impressive. And my understanding is that AP biology and chemistry will follow possibly in successive years. That there's
That's
just
correct.
Some different planning involved in that.
That's
Due
correct.
to other electives, okay. Just because I thought that might be a question that comes up, Susan.
Yeah, so, as I recall, and maybe things have changed, this would be our first AP science class,
That's correct.
To my knowledge, that's correct, yes.
Yes.
which has been a goal of this board and this district for at least consistently stated for the last 5 years. So this would be a way of meeting that goal.
Any other questions on physics in particular?
The advanced placement language and composition is, we have an AP literature currently in our curriculum. We've not had advanced placement comp and language before, and the recommendation English department is to add that. That would again be a junior focused course mostly. A senior could take it, but again, we have at the junior level, we have a regular and an honors English. And the difference here is that the English department would like to keep the honors in place as well as the AP, so students would either have an option to stay in a regular junior English, to be placed in the honors by test score, or to opt into AP if they wished. And it's a full-year course, and Jackie Shore is here this evening, and Jackie will prepare the curriculum and the syllabus and so on for that course.
So if you don't qualify for honors, you can take AP?
Anybody could take AP. We've never had any prerequisite. Every time that students simply sign up, yes. But so a student who would normally go into regular English could opt into the AP if they want. We certainly aren't going to discourage them from doing that. But there will be 3 junior level options now. There'll be the regular English, the honors, and then if students wish to take the AP.
Any questions about that? Okay. Then the next one would be,
Next one also
Yeah.
comes from the English department, yes, that's a, Gothic and horror literature is an elective, senior elective, that the English department feels like there's a niche for, and would be something to obviously promote our college readiness standards, but our reading and writing through, but this genre. And so they brought this course forward, and Jeremy Deuce is here tonight if there's any questions regarding this material of these authors. I have very little background in this area, so.
One of the comments Jeremy made to me was that his students have expressed an interest in this particular genre. And it's, you know, for us to develop a course that comes in, at least in part through student interest, I think is a real positive for us.
So instead of reading the paper every day, can I just sit in on their class?
Instead of reading the paper.
I don't know that you get the same material, but it sounds pretty interesting, actually. I would think it would be appealing to a lot of students, so. I think anything that gets kids to read more is great, so thank you for this suggestion. I think it's a good one. Any other questions about that?
The next course is a computer science course, and basically entry level, and Kevin Krenz, who's one of our math teachers, has developed this course with Jim Koski, and we have an entry-level computer science course, if you will, right now. It's a semester course. This is a revision of that with some work that Kevin's doing through a university, and actually expands it to a full year, and is a little more comprehensive, and he's consulted with tech ed and with business education in terms of areas that they overlap a little bit, with some hardware things, with some robotics and those kind of things, and done a nice job of keeping those communication lines open. We would not require students, because we want to make sure it'll fit in schedules, to take both semesters. It is recommended they take both, but we wouldn't tell a student who couldn't fit the full year into their schedule that it was all or nothing. They would be able to semesterize this course if they needed to. But Kevin is here this evening to answer questions regarding this curriculum or any changes it is from our previous course.
Okay, so this replaces the existing course, which is currently a tech ed course, or is it?
No, this replaces the current intro computer science course.
Right. Oh, and
That's a semester long. This is 2 semesters of it, but it's a revision of that. So it'll replace a semester course that was introductory to computer science.
Okay. And then their tech ed department has made a fair investment in hardware already, and I'm wondering why you're using a different set of hardware than they're using. Maybe that's a question you can't answer.
I can't answer, but I can tell you they've consulted with one another. Is that a fair question?
Yeah. The curriculum is called Exploring Computer Science, is developed by the Los Angeles School District to increase the quality of intro computer science education, as well as access to it, and get more females and more non-white students to enroll. That curriculum has 6 different units, and one of them is on robotics using Mindstorms. Very expensive, and some of the other things in our district already are teaching that. And with that released curriculum, they recommend that you can adjust units 5 and 6 based on your district. So we're looking at swapping out unit 6, which was that, and got more in the tech ed department for a Raspberry Pi, which is a $35 computer. That helps us specialize more in what our strengths are, and then make sure we're not overlapping with a different department.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Do you see this as a piece that we can integrate as we start moving forward on the Technology Excellence Award, State Scholarship Award, that's being
For the
non-funded but being criteria?
for the Excellence in Technology Education Award. That might depend on how we define our criteria and where the course sits in the department, but I think it's certainly worthy of a conversation to see how that fits together.
So wouldn't that be a part of what you would want to do, is use this type of curriculum development to kind of get us to a place? We write the criteria.
Right. Oh, I would certainly think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you thought about that, 'cause
I haven't. I haven't been hands-on with the writing of that. I'm familiar with it, but we haven't gotten that far down the road. But it seems to me it would be a fit. but we'd run it by the folks.
Great, super, thanks.
Other questions? Okay.
The last course on the list is a pharmacology course, and Kelly Garbish presented this course. She teaches our MEDOC and felt like this was a gap in our curriculum that would have some interest for students. And students who took this course and completed it are eligible then to take an exam. They'll be independent of us, but they can take an exam and actually become certified as a pharmacy tech. And we think would meet a niche for a number of student careers in the medical area that we don't currently cover. And Kelly's here this evening too for specific questions you might have regarding this course, but Sheila Hibner and I are very excited about this. We think it's really going to be a nice addition.
It's only a semester long, or?
I think so. Kelly's it right? Semester.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Are we dropping classes? Or are we just adding more classes to workload, or how are we?
These will all be student driven. The first four are all in core areas, and so we don't expect that students are going to take in addition to or double up in an English or a science necessarily. So the AP ones are going to be in place of our regular curriculum. The computer science one is just going to expand. This one will be in addition to. We did offer a part of Kelly's thinking in this. We did offer a nursing class because we've had difficulty, as you know, with our certified nursing program, keeping it going. That got pulled out from underneath us. And we offer a regular nursing program because it's not certified now, that the enrollment that has dropped off. And we're hoping it will keep going, but Kelly feels like this will fill a niche that we'll be able to handle with our current staffing. But we won't know until students sign up. But most of these should, if not all, should fit into current things and replace something we have rather than be an add-on. But I can't guarantee that. To me, it would be a good problem if I had to add a section or put somebody on overload if we had that kind of interest from students.
So Paul, do these, one of the questions that the community always asks, and I just thought to put it out publicly so that people can think about it while they make decisions, but in terms of getting credit for a class like this, a pharmacology class, would that be considered a science class?
No, not at this time. You wouldn't get science credit for it,
So
no.
what graduation credit do you get for this?
It would just be an elective, like the MEDOC classes are currently now.
Okay.
In the nursing class. It wouldn't count as one of the core
Because, I
elective.
look at I'm just looking at the integration of as we move forward and the number of people that we put out from the school district into the healthcare specialty areas where there are jobs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I think a key piece of this one is the preparation for the certification. And
I
it's
think
different than a
that's
credit
I think
issue,
that's
but
important too. I'm just talking about credit, and in a while ago, when we would teach genetics and anatomy, and this is all a piece of that. So I guess I just encourage you to keep considering how this fits within particularly the fourth year elective science curriculums. And I know that we've always talked about that in relation to some of the technology programming too, when we start to get those integration overlaps. I understand why you're not doing that now, but if a student could take this as a science class and then also get a certification piece, that's super. Again, it's just a thought about how it comes together.
We often look at that, and you get into the licensing of the teacher, and whether they can offer, and all those kind of things too. But as you realize, with most of our kids, even though we have 24 credits for graduation, the vast majority of our kids finish with 28 to 30, and a lot of those are electives. So we really hope that students will dive into these courses out of their career planning and their portfolios and those kind of things. And the meeting a core requirement is certainly an incentive, but we're hoping a number of these courses will be an interest to kids without that having to be in place. And because as soon as you put it into a core area, it is going to displace something else, because kids' schedules are full in those areas. So they would opt to not take a science instead of this. Our hope is they'll take this in addition to their science core.
That's right. And again, Bill Ziegler grabbing your kid in the middle of the hall and saying, you could be taking 2 science classes. Did you understand that? And how often we don't do that with kids, because instead of a study hall, they can take of the elective science classes as a junior.
Yeah. That's why we don't let Bill back in the building anymore, so.
I know, because he was, I'm actually touched him, but he's certainly not in the corner.
Okay, any other questions? All right, and so on this one, this is on for potential approval, so seeing, unless there's further discussion, you can still have discussion. I would ask for a motion for approval of these new high school courses for 2015-16 as proposed. Someone?
Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you for your willingness to come and waiting, even though we didn't have a lot of questions for you. Thank you. Okay, then we will move back up to unfinished business, to discussion and possible approval of Studer Group strategic planning proposal.
Okay, well, the board has discussed this a few times. Back in October, during my superintendent report, I talked about the process for developing our next strategic plan. Of course, you've gotten regular updates on our plan that has since expired and the results of that. And then we also had a special board meeting earlier this month to talk about specifically what the Studer Group would do as far as their recommendations as if we hired them as a facilitator. So I'll just briefly summarize, and then we can get into any discussion or take any questions that the board members have. The strategic plan that was written in 2011, the process that was used at that time was to use an outside facilitator to first come in and actually write a new vision statement. And in that vision statement piece, that was there were a wide range of stakeholders involved with that. Teachers, administrators, board members, community members, and to really talk about the vision of the district. Then when it came to actually writing the plan, it was strictly an administrative role to do that, to say, okay, look at the data, what are the things that we're going to do to accomplish that vision. And then as a result of that strategic plan, it was really written as a continuous improvement plan, almost entirely focused on student achievement. There was one small piece in there with regard to efficiency, with regard, with the budget piece, but otherwise it was focused on student achievement, as it should. Obviously, that's why we're here, and that's the most important thing that we do. And so when we look at that, when I looked at where the plan was at and what approach should we take in writing the new plan, the one thing that I think is really important as a district that we do is in our next plan have a much more wide-ranging plan that in fact, I really appreciate some of the comments we made earlier tonight about, the role of other individuals that aren't directly working with students but are indirectly, and why do we have those, and what part do they play in our student achievement and our ultimate mission of educating children. And so that's really important that is all spelled out so that we have, and it really goes back to the communication that we've been talking about since I've been here, and that's clearly a goal that we need to improve communication about what we're doing, and that's one of the key components of having a strategic plan is not only provide that direction for us, but it's a communication piece. This is what we're working on in the effort of continuous improvement. You've already heard at tonight's meeting several examples of excellence happening in the district, and those things will always continue, and you don't need a plan for, to have teachers work with principals in developing course proposals that are going to benefit students. Certainly when we write plans, we look at data, ultimately some of those things fit into that in our analysis of, okay, how do we measure if it's working and what we want it to do, and so that's an important piece as well. But the core work, and the word collaboration gets used a lot of course that's the way to do things. So the bottom line is when we look at this next strategic plan, I think it's really important that it's much more encompassing and not only look at student achievement, look at, and we've used the four terms in this proposal, the term quality to represent the student achievement, people, the workforce involvement, HR, what is the role of everyone in the district and how does that look? And we've got our committee on teacher compensation, and we've used the words attract and retain. That's pretty simple. We need great staff members in order to educate children. Okay, well, again, how do we measure the success of that, and how does that all fit in to what we're trying to do? The third piece is service, okay, looking at, again, the internal and external communities. What is our purpose? Who are we trying to serve? How are we going to measure that as well? And then lastly, the finance, of course, is all important. Given the limited finances, it is essential that every single dollar we spend directly or indirectly is towards, that purpose. So, I think we all understand the importance of having this, plan. So then the question is, well, how do we develop it? And there's several, and the question came up, at some of our previous meetings, well, what are the options? What do other school districts do, and how do you go about it? And it's as wide-ranging in Dane County as it is in the state of Wisconsin as it is nationwide, that there are a number of ways of writing strategic plans. Some districts don't even have them. Okay, they write some annual goals or no goals at all, and they just, and it doesn't mean that students don't learn and they don't achieve, but they just choose not to write plans. Most do, and so some will write them within staff. They won't hire outside consultants or facilitators, and will work with the staff they have to write them. Other districts will hire other educators, superintendents or retired superintendents oftentimes, or other administrators that have experience in K-12 to come in and facilitate a process. And then, of course, the other thing is to use outside specialists if that's what they do as part of their work, full-time, such as the Studer Group. And I guess the other one along with that are non-education people that facilitate. I gave you one example in your board docs of a neighboring district that used a facilitator that does not have an education background but works with strategic planning of all kinds of different groups. Another one that I just learned of this week, I spoke with superintendent from Verona and how they did their last one. They also used someone that had nothing to do with education but just came in and looked at the process, and of course the experts are in the room to provide that. It's really just that process. So one of the things I think that's really important to make clear, that no matter who we use for facilitator, and including the Studer Group, is our plan. Okay, it's the people in our district that write the plan, that decide what's in it, and the facilitator is exactly that. They facilitate the discussion and keep the direction going, and that's why most districts that use that facilitator from the outside, it is important to have someone that doesn't necessarily have a stake in the district, that is going to look at things objectively and to work through that process. And I do think it is important to state as well is whether where people are located makes a difference as far as their accessibility and how you go about things. But as far as we could hire a facilitator from Madison that knows nothing about our Monona Grove School District and the inner workings, the facilitator is not going to have that. So whether it's local or outside the state doesn't make any difference in that respect. It's again the people in the district that are writing the plan. So you've heard the presentation from Studer about what their recommended process is, and the big difference, and again, whether we went with Studer or anyone else, I absolutely believe that this has the process we need to take. Last time, the plan was written by administrators only. I think it is essential that this plan does include more stakeholders. And the question came up earlier tonight, how do we define stakeholders? Studer Group doesn't define the stakeholders, we do. We decide who gets to participate, how many, and in what capacity. And that's really key. So in this, we would absolutely have, whether it be through focus groups, discussions, surveys, a combination. It is important that to me, I think, and this board, that we have that involvement as we write this new plan. And I guess the last thing I want to address is the concept of accountability. That came up a little bit at our special meeting, and when you start talking about accountability, sometimes it can be people get nervous. Who's being held accountable and how and why? With accountability, there's only one person that's accountable to this board, and that's myself. Now, ultimately, we all are collectively, and we're all collectively accountable to our constituents and the people, the taxpayers of the district who support this, school district, and ultimately we're accountable to our children. That's the way I like to look at it is, they're our real clients. Those are the people that we serve. But given that, following the vision of the community, certainly. So when we talk about accountability here, Studer Group doesn't hold anyone accountable. The accountability is that when we write this plan, I'll be presenting it to the Board of Education. It's really how you hold me accountable for the direction of the district, and that's the only accountability piece. We already have accountability measures in place outside of a strategic plan. And so I think we need to be honest and not be afraid to use that word, but that's not the purpose of the plan. Okay, everything we do, we should be held accountable. Strategic planning and everything else and the work that we do. So, so like I said, with that, I'm not going to go through the details of the proposal. Just to remind the board that I am asking for approval of the proposal. by board policy. Again, it's not required. Normally in the process, this is something I would just go out and present and do the plan and hire someone to do it. But because of the interest in this case, certainly that would not be a prudent thing to do. And I felt it was really important that I do have the support of the board, and thus is why we have it on the agenda for your consideration tonight. I guess the last thing I should mention, I said that about 3 times already, but as far as the other work that the Studer Group does, it's not part of this proposal. You heard that they do also do leadership coaching and help facilitation of plans. That's not part of this. That is something I'm certainly interested in exploring, but it's not part of the proposal, and this is a standalone. So if you do choose to support this proposal in writing a strategic plan, there's absolutely no commitment to move forward with any kind of coaching beyond that. That's certainly something we would discuss and need to be honest about that. But tonight we're asking simply for the development of the plan.
Okay. Jeff? And then, I don't know, do you have your hand up, Dean, or no?
I will have it.
You will have it up. I just didn't want to jump the gun. Okay.
Are we ready for motions? We're not ready for motions.
We are, I mean, technically we should be, but I'd rather, our typical fashion is that we discuss things first and then make a motion, so I would rather have some, I think I'd. Well, that's Robert's rule, we don't usually do that. But, I mean, you're free to make, we usually make a.
I would suggest we discuss some of the elements that we're concerned about.
That's why we don't usually make a motion right off the bat, because we've found an experience.
Robert's rules.
Exactly, it's easier to have some discussion so that people have a sense of where it might go before a motion is made. And then we have to amend and amend and amend and amend, et cetera. So, anyway, so comments, questions? Dean?
I have a series of them.
Okay.
I'm concerned about this group because of its reputation in some places. Okay. I checked out a few of them. Are we talking about using Studer in one phase? Is there 2 phases here to this process?
Tonight, we're only talking about the phase of facilitating the development of the plan.
So the answer is yes, but with the caveat that we may be interested in looking, but that would be a future discussion.
What is the second phase, as you understand? Is that the coaching?
Correct.
Okay, so the coaching is number 2.
Correct.
Right.
So the first phase is what's on this sheet of paper
Yes.
here.
Right.
The thing that I have discovered, where at least from the standpoint of teachers and others, that this tends to go wrong, is that all of the presentation that Studer gave to us who came to their presentation is very good. It sounded like me proposing to a board many years ago too. I'm only going to give you what you want, it's not us, and that sort of thing. And that sounds good, and I believe that's the case. But they're going to help a cluster, whoever we want, right? Participate in that phase of it. So when we talk about that can be the board, that can be a whole lot of constituent groups. Is that true?
Yes.
Community, parents, teachers, and so
administrators,
forth.
Right.
I think that their proposal has a little bit of some narrowness. For example, they define the 4 key essential pillars of excellence, and quality they put down as student achievement. I hope that we do not have our only criteria for a successful school in our plan as being test scores, which is what I read student achievement to be. Because there's a lot of things that schools do that are not measured by some test. That's all come from OECD and a whole lot of other groups that want to compare countries and schools and states and that sort of thing. Then it says people, workforce engagement. Does that mean to you teachers?
Sure. Amongst.
Okay. The financial efficiency and effectiveness. I understand, and you have convinced me over a period of weeks, that we do need a new plan, because I do see the other one. The value of the other one, well, it did not touch on the things that you wanted. was the incorporation of the school culture and how we do things here. That's what a culture is. Do you see a place in this Studer proposal where we can capture and benefit from what we do well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as far as the process of
That's a
continuous
leading
improvement,
question, but
you talk about the process of continuous improvement or the actual teaching and learning piece that we do well?
both.
Okay, sure. You know, the process is still up to us, and that absolutely would not change as far as developing the PDSAs, and we can decide that has nothing to do with the plan itself, how we implement it. So yes, I would expect that to continue, and in both cases.
And I think in this, but there's two phases in this part one, which is getting a lot of public input to define the goals and objectives,
Right.
Which I understand we'll be using teachers and we use community members and that sort of thing. In my 6 sample research, the thing that I found that phase went well everywhere, but where it started to narrow and go wrong was in the phase in which it goes to the strategic planning committee. Okay, and they say having no more than 8 people. Now, it seems to me that if we're going to engage at that point, we need to get down to the district and maybe not the community itself. But if we're getting down to that part, I would hope, are you planning to include the teacher group, the employees? I'm remembering my lessons taken home. You sent me and paid me to go to that thing, and so I'm coming back. Did you see a couple of teachers being on that planning committee?
You know, to be honest, that's not finalized yet. I see a couple of ways of going with that. I have had discussions with the folks from Studer about the makeup at that committee and what that might look like. And so that's something I think that I'm not prepared to say exactly whom would be on it at this time. I think that's to be determined.
Yeah, I've seen them, in my judgment, they seem to, it seems to me if you want to have a holistic planning process, that you need to have all of the immediate stakeholders discussing that. We've had very good success with the handbook, I think. We did a SIPA process there, and I think our OPEB process has done it. And as frustrating as the teacher compensation committee meeting, sometimes, I've said, if one more teacher asks another tough question that we can't answer at this time, that's it. But that engagement, as I put down earlier, the collision of ideas there has forced us to come up with some things. And I would like to vote yes on this, but I cannot vote yes unless there's some assurance that we're going to make it what it's supposed to be, to incorporate all the stakeholders, including the vital ones at the grassroots that will do this. Yeah. And where I see this go wrong, it's ended up being a top-down process after all this stuff, and where they'll tell us whatever we want to know. So I understand how they made their presentation to us, and then they say, well, we're going to come and work with you later. But I think that's very important, and to keep that. And I'd also like to make sure that once we get through this process, that we bring that back to large groups, meetings of teachers and the public where we started.
Yeah.
That you see.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I guess I absolutely am confident giving that assurance that yes,
on the last or on the former.
Well, when we talk about the broad stakeholders, and again defining that, how many people, whomever, but yes, that absolutely has to be part of it. And in one of the kind of the general outline that they propose is depending on, regardless of who is part of what committee, is whatever we choose to be those stakeholder groups, is that when it does go to the committee for the draft plan, that does go back out again to those same groups again for review. Okay. I think that's essential.
But I think in developing that plan, it's important because that group will be setting the agenda. And if we are talking about consultation as opposed And I have this definition of participation here because, and it's a good one because Sue Fox gave it to me. And
There you go.
and it's I
I
used
got
to
it from our
teach the course in
consultant, by the
school
way.
community relations, but this helped me. But I wanted to use something I know Sue believed in. And collaboration says to partner with the public in each aspect of the decision-making, including development of alternatives. And I think particularly this applies to all of our publics within the school district, not to fall into that top-down trap. And if you could give me those assurances, I can vote for this today, but if not, I can't.
Well, I would like to. I want to make sure I clearly understand the second piece about, you know, what you mean by top down, because ultimately it would be me alone presenting this plan to the board.
Yeah, but I think in developing that plan that be presented to the board, I think it'd be important that there be collaboration, involvement in that process. Or you're going to be asking for a thumbs up, thumbs down from the board to validate what you're doing, and we like to do that. And I don't want to have a debate and that debate and discussion that we're having tonight then again.
So the assurance that all key stakeholders are involved in the development, absolutely, I can give you that assurance.
Okay. And I think it would only make sense that if you're going to do surveys and have focus groups, that the plan that's developed by the committee needs to reflect what comes out of those groups. And if it doesn't, when it goes back, we certainly should ask questions, as should, I mean, I think that's the expectation. I also think that a group of 8 is pretty decent for, I think it's hard when you get much beyond that. I think when you look at your facilities committee, for example, too, if you get much beyond 8, 10, it gets hard to, it gets to be an unwieldy group. So I think that is important. I think that's built in. That's certainly my expectation, that we don't have focus groups just to have focus groups. I mean, you have them for a reason, and that's why, same thing with the teacher compensation plan. When we had the World Cafe, we got some ideas that fed into what we had already talked about, and with the teacher input around the table, you know, we certainly listened and made some changes with the retirement plan. We took that out for listening sessions. We came back and worked on it some more, a couple times. That would be my expectation, that happens.
I'm trying to get Dan to say the same thing.
Okay, well, I don't think Dan wants to commit to who's going to be on the committee of 8 tonight. I think you heard him say that, and so if you're trying to get him to say that, you probably won't get that tonight. Is that right? Because you're still thinking about it. But I don't think it's our role to dictate who's on that committee either, I guess. But I think it is important that we make very clear that, yes, we do expect stakeholder input, and that, I mean, if that's what
I did not want to debate the chair. I'm trying to, because I know Dan's going to be chairing that committee. Right. And it seems to me, developing the plan, you know, it's who makes the Constitution of the United States and the convention, and not who ratifies it, is important. Because in that committee of 8 or 9 or 7 is where the hard work will be done. And I think Susan, you just said that we've come up with a better product because of teacher involvement and teacher planning and all that kind of thing. I think you will too. And I would urge you to say yes tonight, that you will have a couple of teachers involved in that process.
Well,
and not just send it back to a
first of all, there's not a guarantee that will even be a committee of 8. Okay, that was a recommended number that was there. Like I said, I had a preliminary discussion about that, and part of that recommendation, most of the districts that they use, that they've worked with, are much larger than ours. And so when you look at looking at the size of different groups and so on, you know, part of that is to pare that down. So, you know, I guess I'm not willing to commit to exactly whom would it be on that committee. And I've given it a lot of thought about how that should be, and should, you know, be a cross section of groups, what people at district level and so on. And part of it is, again, the role. And I don't know that, you know, that committee is not writing the plan. You know, I don't think we can give it that much weight. They are bringing everything in together from the groups, but that work is what's going to develop the plan. And it's not so much the decision-making piece.
It says the draft strategic plan.
Right, but the content of it is going to come from all the focus groups. And it's just a matter of putting it together.
And prioritizing, I assume,
But in that, I hope I think you have said in other forums that you would hope to have different and better measures and processes and things like that. And I think if that's going to be a part of the plan, the populations that are dealing with that are, it's important for that. And it's a, and I can just tell you, where every strategic plan, but where Studer has gone wrong is where it's been taken over by a small group and not all of the critical publics have been involved with it all the way. I'll stop now. I made my point.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and well taken.
Susan?
Well, again, thank you for letting me kind of speak to that, to kind of follow with Dean, because I have some very similar concerns, although I did probably as much research as you did. I didn't find anything specifically that said they specifically did not get out and do the stakeholders the way they should have. And in the 2 school districts where some staff were critical of the way the information was gathered, it was directed that this is where the groups would be. And I think I mean, there's some analogies and some good examples, I think, to think about as we look at how we want to do this. And, I think one of them is that when we were sitting in our retirement planning committee and we were talking about listening sessions, and we said, okay, where are we going to go? We really think it's important that we are out talking to all the teachers about the changes in what we have and what the pool is and how we're going to build this, right? Okay, somebody said 3 schools, and we go, 3 schools? We have 5 schools. I mean, we need to be out in the schools. Jared, what's our population of our employees that are teachers, for instance?
We have 271 teachers.
Like 80% or 75% or
yeah,
something like that? Okay, so that means that we should be able to see some representation in that arena as we move forward. And I strongly support the fact that we started at the very beginning of the handbook committee saying, this is the committee, these are the people who are going to be at the table. I would have added an administrator later as we realized we had some knowledge gaps in that area, and we should have been more alert to that. But again, thinking on your compensation committee, it really did. You always let them speak, but it took almost a year to say, come to the table. If we're going to do this plan, and we're going to do this in this community, then we're going to do it with the community, and we're going to do it with teachers. And I feel the exact same way you do, that I don't want to hire a consultant that isn't going to do it that way. And I do for similar reasons. I have some concerns with the way this plan is outlined. Construct a project work plan. Yay, we got to do that. We got to be systematic. In collaboration with district leaders, that sounds selective, to ensure the completion of a draft strategic plan. But it doesn't say using the input. So if I'm going to write this and I'm going to be a part of this, it's going to say, based on the input that we get from the communities. And then support district selected. Generally, when you go to the workshops we just went to last Wednesday, selected is not a major word that's used in that project work. It's talked about strategic planning, district-wide engagement. Man, engagement of the community, engagement of 75 to 80% of the population and the other 20, and all of us. And and then engage internal and external stakeholders. Hello, that's number 3. That to me is number 1. That comes first, and then the other pieces come after that. And then using the results of widespread engagement, that's the language. That's the key to me. And then having the strategic planning committee facilitate those efforts to define the vision. That to me says it completely differently than how it's written here, and that's a piece of what's important to me, is that we build this together. And as a board member, I do not expect to come into a strategic planning committee never having seen the goals or the mission or been a part of it or committed to it and say, you got to pass this tonight. So I want to make sure that this framework and this structure and this process is incredibly structured to bring in number 3 and make that important and key piece of what we do. That's a commitment I have. And if there's any question, so I strongly support using a facilitator because we don't have anybody that we can pull out internally or in the community out of what they currently do, whether it's having 2, 3, 4 kids or having a full-time job or whatever it is. You know, Jessica Ace could walk out there and do this beautifully today. Does she have the time and energy to do that? That's killing her right now just to get to board meetings and stuff. We have to be honest about the time commitment. We have to be honest about the experience that it takes to be able to do this job. And we have to be honest about non-bias and objective. And even if Dan Olson is one of the most highly qualified persons in the United States of America today, it is not fair to put him up there and say, well, he's biased, because that piece is going to filter no matter who stands up there and does that. And it's going to be critical that, and that's why then we finally get to, can this group be the non-biased, neutral person? And that's the question I think that haunts us, not so much building the strategic plan or using an outside facilitator. It's, can this group be the non-biased, neutral?
Were you commenting or?
No, I'm good.
Well,
Sorry.
Do you have a comment, Jessica?
Well, I have a question. And kind of to that end, Dan, could you speak a little bit to the thought of, you know, I hate going back to ground zero, but could you speak a little bit to the practice of hiring area retired superintendents as a facilitator of, you know, the development of a strategic plan, at least your thoughts about that in reference to our work?
Sure. I'll be honest, when I started almost a year ago, you know, knowing that the plan would need to be developed, that was my initial thought. That would be the way that we go. And that's kind of the easiest things. I know a couple people personally that do the work. And so when I started, you know, asking some of the area superintendents about, you know, who have they used, I'm certainly familiar more in the Milwaukee area of what districts have done over there and from my prior experience. And through those discussions is where I learned, you know, about the Suter Group and their work with, you know, some of the other districts. So, the facilitator, I mean, I guess what really, the rationale for the recommendation of not using someone individually like that is honestly the possibility of a continued relationship with tutor. I need to be clear about that. Because to write the plan itself, you know, it's not that difficult of a process.
Right.
You know, it really isn't. And so there's lots of people that can do it all in a similar fashion. And I guess the other thing, when I looked at, probably the biggest thing for me was, you know, looking at the all-encompassing part, you know, looking beyond the student achievement. And when I saw one district in particular and I saw their plan, I was looking at the sample, I thought that's exactly what we need. And then to find out that, you know, Student Help and Develop it is, you know, there. So could we get a very good plan with a different facilitator? Of course we can.
Could we also then continue, you know, that relationship with that facilitator as well in the...
And that's exactly the district did last time.
Right.
Yeah, with Matthew Fail, he not only facilitated development of the plan, but also stayed on as a consultant to work, you know, with the district after that. Depending, not as many, well, a practicing superintendent would not do that. They wouldn't have the time. And it's going to be a much, you know, so, and there's certainly other people that do it, have more of a commitment than others. So that really varies. The other thing to, you know, keep in mind, okay, some prairies, when the districts we referenced that is working, they did not hire a Studer Group to write their strategic plan. They already had it done. They actually used a superintendent that you're all aware of. Joanne Sternke facilitated their strategic plan. Once the plan was done, then they brought Studer in to help with the implementation piece. So there's lots of different ways of going about that as well.
Stoughton followed a similar process.
Yeah.
They have brought Studer in after their plan was written and are using them to help implement.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Research says that the biggest reason that teachers leave the profession, and almost half of them leave after 5 years, is lack of support or lack of perceived support. I think it's pretty obvious that there is a at least perceived lack of support from our teachers right now. So we also had a 92% union retention amongst our teachers. And I think it's wrong to hire a group that has been anti-union and unwanted in our community. and especially and then from Florida. And I agree that somebody from Madison could not know Monona Grove, but they would know Wisconsin. And I think Wisconsin has been a unique education experience the last 4 years, with all-encompassing everything we've done. I think being in the Long Range Facilities Committee, we're going to eventually, in the near future, need a referendum. And I think if we ignore the community-wide thought that this is the wrong group, and I think it's the wrong group, I think that will really put a huge obstacle over passing any referendum that we need in the future. What did I say? Oh, I actually did some research also. I talked to somebody I respect immensely from Sun Prairie, and she told me that it was the biggest waste of time she's ever dealt with in her life dealing with Studer, because she went to every single meeting they had. She said they kept hearing the same things over and over and over in the sessions, but very few of those things made it in any coherent way into the final report. I never felt my time was more wasted. I felt like an extra in a movie where we weren't even allowed to see the script. So if they run sham meetings, perceived or not, and we didn't, and the community pushed back against them to begin with, then we're really going to be behind the 8 ball, I think, in community-wide communications. And another thing is, if we don't need, if it's going to be always our plan and never them, then why do we need them? Like, what do we need of their expertise? But you've already said, actually, that that's not the way it is, because you've consulted them on who should be on the committee. So then all of a sudden now, their philosophies are starting to come through, and I think their philosophies are wrong, and I don't know. And the way I read the contract, this we can get into later if it's going to go, but the committee seems to be the heart and soul of our plan. So that's how I perceive everything. So.
Other comments? Jessica?
I just have a question for Jeff. Not to get any back and forth, but just for informational purposes. Can you just give me a little bit more background of your the anti-union aspect of this group that you just referenced?
If you look on their website, and I've spent a lot of time on their website, once you get past all the I love everybody cliches, there's a lot of, we went to the Educational Reform Conference in Florida and we loved it. Leaders everywhere there, lots and lots of that, and that consisted of Jeb Bush, who says we need to get beyond the union control of schools, Connie Rice, who I don't know why she was there, Campbell Brown, who says the problem with teacher tenure is it protects sexual predators, and Marco Rubio, who everything he says makes you shake your head. So I mean, there wasn't anybody at this conference, an education reform concert or conference that if you look, it's all over their Twitter, it's all over their Facebook, it's all over their website. And the education reform was, let's privatize, let's charter, let's really get our public schools, our private schools paid for with public money. So.
Well, we certainly aren't going that route.
Well, we aren't going that route, but...
I mean, the state might be, but we're not.
We're not, but if that's who, the people that are guiding us along, then I
Thanks, I just wanted to...
Peter?
My primary concern here is the fact that we've seen so much, it's clear from the feedback that the staff doesn't support this. And when it comes to something as important as putting together a strategic plan, that's important. In fact, I don't know how you succeed at doing that if you don't have the support of the staff. And I don't know how you succeed without the strategic plan succeeds at the end of the day, once you have it in place, when you try to implement it, if there's not support of the staff in the process. And that's what I'm hearing. It's very concerning to me that we're handicapped. We want this process to be successful, and it's clear to me that we're starting off, one step down the ladder at least, because we don't have clear support, or actually it's more than that. We seem to have fairly uniform opposition to working with the student group for whatever reason. And I don't know, how are we going to deal with that and to make a success? And is there an alternative that's more that doesn't start in the negative, in the end zone?
Well, part of part of what I was thinking about this, to be honest, because I know that Dan does have an interest in possibly working with them further in terms of facilitating how we reach our goals. I know that's why I just talked to someone from Stoughton about why they hired them, and they also already had a strategic plan that they developed with a different person. And they brought in Studer. They've been working with them for over a year, and they're working now with their departments and administrators on, goals are set and what are some strategies to get to those goals. How do you know you're measuring the right things? That whole piece. My thought in hiring them for this part was that we would get a look at them and how they work and know better whether they were people we wanted to continue with or not. The board, prior to anybody now sitting on the board, made a commitment to the Baldridge Continuous Improvement Plan when Gary Schumacher was the superintendent. Gary Schumacher was a trained examiner. The board had been kind of working on it, and they brought Joanne Sternke in to speak, and for some reason they never quite got the ball rolling. And then when Craig came in, we talked about it again. I've been through that whole process. We again, by a vote, committed to the Baldridge Continuous Improvement Plan yet again. And that's how we brought in Brenda Clark and Matthew Fail, because they had that Baldridge training. So it was more like pick a system. And I've said this before, that as a teacher, one of the things that bothered me about the district was I felt like things were there was too much of a silo system. It was flavor of the month with professional development. You'd have somebody come in and talk about reading in the content areas. You wouldn't see them again until maybe another year later. They'd come in again, and it became kind of a joke because I guess we're all experts at that because now we're on to the next thing. I just felt like there were no systems. And then when I got on the board, I realized there really were no systems in more ways than I had any idea as a teacher. And so that's how I got interested in pursuing the Continuous Improvement Plan. Went to the Baldridge Conference and heard the speakers and got sold on that as a system. Now you could pick a different model, but it's a well-known, well-accepted continuous improvement model. And when I heard people speak from some of these districts on how they were able to improve a lot of their operations, one of the things Pewaukee improved, for example, was the speed with which their computer repair requests were dealt with. I mean, that's seriously how it's systemizing how you approach things. And that's part of the whole Baldridge system. That's how you move. And it started in healthcare. That's how it operates. So to me, the appeal of the Studer Group is that's what they're steeped in, is the Baldridge process. That's what we've been using. The PDSAs, the PDLCs, those all came out of, that's all Baldridge talk. Dashboards, all that stuff. We've already been doing it for a couple of years. And so I saw this group as, because when Dan first mentioned this to me, frankly, that was my first thought, well, why would we do a different group because we're already doing Baldridge? Then I read more about them and I thought, oh, that's what they do. And when I saw the list of superintendents, Joanne Sternke being one, who's been nationally recognized, Pewaukee's gotten a national Baldridge Award as well as a state Baldridge Award, and they have just recently hired Studer to continue to work their effort along that line. I thought, oh, they are Baldridge essentially, which they are. So to me, the appeal was there are people who are currently working locally. Matthew Fail is not. I don't know that he's been brought in for a conference even. I know for a while he did some work with Pewaukee, he did some work with Holman. To my knowledge, he's not coming in now. So it's a matter of finding a group that's working in our state using that same system. That was the appeal for me. I thought it made sense from that standpoint. In terms of the philosophy of some of the individual people, and I'll grant you, I think there are some of the Studer people who were present at our meeting that night may be more interested in pay for performance, for example. I don't know whether they're anti-union or not. I didn't have that conversation. But I just don't think that matters for us. To me, my interest in them is they're steeped in the process. And it's the process that we're looking for. They are not telling us how to do things. We are not adopting their philosophy. They are not telling us what our goals are. It's really like when Matthew came in, and this is probably not a great example because the board has not followed through on this very well, but when he led us through a process to develop our own mission statement, and I was part of, and some of the people in this room were part of the district-wide vision mission statement building. It was a process, and it worked. He clipped it along, moved pretty well because he's done it, he's good at it, and we got a mission vision statement. Is it perfect? Nah, probably not. But it's pretty good, and we've used it. And the same thing with the strategic plan. Same with our board. Our board mission's pretty good, and even though we don't look at it a lot, it's reasonably good. And he had a process for getting us there and getting it done in a couple hours. In fact, That workshop was 2 hours and no longer, and he made it last that way. So it's that expertise that we're looking for. It's people who have ways of leading you through a process. And I will go again to my, well, I'll use another example of a consultant, and this was Matthew Fail. The budget process that we did last time when we had to cut $1.2 million, we had not been real collaborative before. We got kind of our hands slapped. I mean, teachers were not happy about how the budget process was done, and we as a board gave direction that it should be collaborative when we had to cut the $750,000 the year before. And we thought it was, and come to find out it wasn't really as collaboratively done as we thought it should be. So when Matthew came in and was working with the Baldridge system, we said one of the things we want to make sure this time is that this is a more collaborative process because we think there needs to be more buy-in. He is the one who brought in that system that we used, and we had community, teachers, administrators represented, and it was a very time-consuming, but I thought excellent process of budget reduction to cut that amount of money and trim in so many areas, and do it in such a, not only collaborative, but kind of an objective as you can be about those kinds of things, process. That came through the expertise of that consultant who was steeped in the Baldridge system. So that's where I see the value in this. I'll bring up again the VeriCite consultant. Now VeriCite, go online and look at what districts VeriCite has worked with for teacher compensation plans, you're going to find a lot of very conservative districts where I'm guessing there may be some anti-union people on the boards and in the superintendent chairs, I don't know. Some of them have come up with total merit pay plans because that's what they wanted. VeriCite helped them do that. When she came to meet with us, we said, we are not going down that route. We want our plan to be collaborative. We want to have a World Cafe. We want you to reach out and talk to teachers. We want to get input. We want them involved. We want a very different model. She helped us come up with that model, and I think we're all in agreement that she was helpful in those early stages because of her background of dealing with all these types of communication plans in these different districts. She was very valuable in helping us set up that World Cafe, getting the input. We had already done a lot of homework on reading different plans. She brought us some more plans. She was able to kind of winnow it down into easy chunks to look at, to kind of make comparisons. That got us started. Then we worked on our own for a long time, and now we brought her back. Why? Because she's got a lot of expertise, and she's got some software, as does Suter, where we can plug in staff salaries and numbers and start to see, is this plan really going to work? I know there have been periods when we've been working on this plan where I thought, wow, is this really going to work? And now I think it can, because I've seen her flip it up on the software. So we used her when we needed her, is what I'm saying. And I look at Studer as nothing more. I guess what bothers me about this is I think, I don't know that I'd say we have community-wide lack of support for this, because I don't think most of the community frankly knows we're talking about it. We've heard from teachers, and I know there is a lot of anxiety among teachers, and I appreciate that, and that does concern me, but I feel like there's been a lot of misinformation also. I don't think people really understand what this process is. I think they think it's going to have a different kind of impact on their work environment than they think, and I don't. At some point, I think some of this anxiety, I think it's coming from a lot of things. I think it comes from the whole Act 10. We've had a lot of upheaval with Act 10, with the fears about the retirement plan, with the fears about the compensation plan now, and then there's the fears about what is this whole strategic plan. I mean, over the last couple of years when I was talking about our working on something in alignment with our strategic plan, I had at least 2 teachers say, well, strategic plan, what's strategic plan? They didn't know we had one. Which, as I've said, says something about our communication, but it also says something about the fact that apparently it didn't impact them because they didn't know we had one. They knew we were working on goals, and that's really what a strategic plan is. It's a set of goals, and the goals deal with budget. Our last one dealt with all these different categories as well. We had plans we had goals related to student achievement. We had goals related to budgeting, increasing the effectiveness of our financial resources. We had a goal toward improving stakeholder satisfaction, school climate, and we were going to use the climate surveys, which we've done. And we had aligning professional development. Those were all goals. This is nothing more than that, except that it'll be maybe more comprehensive. So I think my concern is that people are putting way too much on what might be the personal philosophies of some individual Suter people versus their knowledge of process. And I apologize for going on so long, but I also wanted to go through all that because I sent that all out in an email, and in light of the public meetings laws, I wanted to make sure I covered everything in my 2-page email, so I think I just did, pretty much. But anyway, I think we need to be careful about making sure people are thinking about this in the right way, and not getting some distorted idea of what a process for developing a plan really is.
But Susan, I would argue that you've made part of my point too. I believe that the strategic plan will work. We failed partially the last time around is because we got engaged in a whole lot of other things, and we never kept up with our own need to follow it up.
Check-ins.
I had 2 homework assignments that I still have on my desk waiting to report to the board. But the things that you cite within this district that I think, I don't want to look back here and see if they approve of it, but by and large, I think the handbook was good. We didn't use on your definition, we did not use collaboration. We used a consultation on that. We met privately as a board committee, and then we said, we want to do this. And we're going to say to the teachers, we really don't want to do this, and never are we going to do this. Now let's meet with them and get some feedback. And we changed our minds. Times, other times we didn't, and so forth. And I wouldn't say that was a collaborative thing. The teacher, but it was successful in it is that we responded genuinely to concerns over time there. And the teacher compensation has been a little more sloppy, you know, partly because we didn't restrict it to the same 3 or 4 teachers each time, and a new one would come in with a different idea. Some ways that was good.
Yeah, it's been pretty solid.
But it's been a good give and take, where, as I said several times, every teacher sitting in that room heard all of our arguments right out in the open, and that sort of thing. I'm not so concerned about Studer per se. I see where they've done a lot of work in school districts that I don't want them doing anywhere close to that here. But it's worked, it seems to me, if we can incorporate something like we did with handbook and OPEB were 2 that we did that were consultative, and the other one was collaborative, which the teacher compensation thing. And I don't think, but we need some kind of commitment to bring people in where decisions are made in their seminal form, not feeding back completely what has been done.
So you're going back to your committee thing, the committee makeup.
Yeah,
I mean, if you read this
proposal, if you do that, it seems to me, I'm willing to buy in that we're going to get back community input and things like that. I don't think they're going to mess up that too much, but it's when they get into advising this committee and all that sort of thing, and the committee is not properly constituted to countervail that, and to have feedback and kickback on that. That's where it gets into trouble, and it also comes in the coaching thing. But we can talk about that one later on.
Actually, Jessica pointed out.
I'm sorry,
Jessica's been up a long time.
Excuse me.
You brought it up the whole time I was talking.
Yeah, and before Dean, so I'm just, sorry.
Okay.
That's all
Go ahead,
right.
Jessica.
You know, I think that, you know, I don't have anything against using consultants in this process. I mean, that's part of the process, and I don't really have a lot of fears about them taking over the process, because I feel like going through our first strategic planning session, you know, we really did drive that car, and having gone through that, I feel comfortable with using consultants in that manner. But I really want to go back to Peter's comment before, in that, you know, perception is reality right now. And right now, we don't have support for the way that the strategic planning organization has kind of unfolded. which, you know, gives me a lot of concern. How are we going to get that support from our staff? What perhaps, you know, there are other groups that are working with this consulting firm right now and getting further along in the process. And one of them that you mentioned is someone that, you know, I think our board has really held in high esteem, the superintendent of Pewaukee. And as you had mentioned, you know, they had crafted their own strategic plan and then went to Studer to work through the implementation process. So what if perhaps we were to have a local superintendent help us walk through the initial phases of doing a strategic plan, giving, you know, say Pewaukee time to get further through the process with this firm and revisit, you know, our thoughts in dealing with them when it comes time to moving on to an implementation phase. I mean, does that sound outlandish? I'm just trying to come up with, you know,
like a John Sturkey or something.
Yeah. Exactly, just kind of an alternative way of getting at this where we can go back to all of our stakeholders and say, you know, we want to build support for what we're going to do because we're not going to be successful if we don't have it. And clearly right now we don't.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate Peter's comments too, because you're right, that is critical. And so I guess I have two thoughts. One is that if the board does approve, you know, using Studer to facilitate, that absolutely is essential. And that's on me to make sure that, to me, it's a communication issue. Okay, the lack of support is because we haven't communicated clearly about what the role would be and so on, and it would be upon me to fix that and really, I guess, prove to the staff, you know, by that, yeah, we are going to involve everyone and the process would have to speak for itself. But you're right, it's a hurdle to overcome. We're not to the point, I haven't been here to the point that I can just simply say to the staff, trust me, because I have to earn that trust, and we're still working on that. And so to me, I see this as an opportunity to do that. And I think the other thing is, I think Susan stated it much better than I did, that was my original intent, is to hire someone else, and the idea that, well, if we are going to consider using them for coaching, that it is kind of a trial run. Might as well have them help with the plan as well. We can kind of see then about, okay, how does that go and what might we want to use it? Because when we talk about the coaching, there's all kinds of different levels of that they do as well as to how much or how little that you might want to use them. So that's the rationale. I guess we've been through that. To answer specifically, if the board chooses not to approve that, absolutely, that'd be plan B. I'd go back and find an individual to facilitate the process.
Well, and there would also be fairly significant cost savings in going at it in that direction. And depending on who we engage to help us in that work, perhaps, you know, that person could give us more insights into, you know, the coaching phase of the Studer offering.
Yeah. And I'll just, I think it is important to make sure that we address the you know, cost and I know anytime every dollar is important, and we're talking thousands of dollars, of course. And I just wanted, you know, to keep things in perspective about where we're at in the budget. With a $34 million budget, the proposal, you know, was a little over $14,000. You know, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on professional development. You know, we spend, you know, $150,000 just on our new teacher mentoring project, which is essential, and it's money well spent without question. But I think keeping that perspective on what we do, you know, this process is so important and drives all the work that we do. But so I think the most important thing is that we have a good product that comes out of it, and so.
Yeah, I just had a couple of things. I guess first would be, what kind of timeline are we looking to be tied to?
I would like the plan done by the end of June so that we can use it then to go back to our school teams with their, you know, writing their school improvement plans as a basis.
And I guess a couple of my comments is basically process. They really help facilitate the process. They're not, you know, basically coming up with the strategic plan themselves and forcing anything down our throats. It's basically a process, and I guess you know, we don't have to go with them. It could be, you know, anybody else, but it still boils down to the process as far as who we use. And that's basically what we're getting them for. It's basically going to be our goals, our values, basically whatever we see fit as far as the strategic plan, which route we want to go. They're basically just going to help us facilitate it. It's the biggest thing. And I guess we just need to more or less get that out, because from all the emails we've seen, seems like that's the biggest misconception, is that they're coming in, we're getting somebody, we're getting an outsider to come here and write our plan, which has never been the goal, never been that thought. And the importance of a good strategic plan. I mean, we're a good district now, but we're always looking to get better, which is part of continuous improvement of what we want to do. And with a good strategic plan, which is going to help us get there, help us become a great district, we can just not do one, and then we can just be happy or content with where we are right now. But I don't think that's what any of us want. We want to continue to get better, continue to be like one of the best districts in the state, and we need to basically bring our goals together and find a way of basically being able to monitor those goals and just make sure they're moving in the direction we want to see fit. And I do like Jessica's idea, maybe, you know, maybe if we could get Pewaukee to maybe come and maybe walk us through the process. But then also on that note, we got to be careful too, because I'm sure somebody may not like something there. You know, we got to be careful with that. We got to be careful. You know, she may have the same concepts as the student group has. So we may only want 8 people on the committee, and we don't know what that makeup looks like. So we always got to be careful with that and not just go off of the beliefs or what we think they're going to do as opposed to what they're actually going to do.
I think it'd be important to have a consultant that has background in Baldridge. I mean, that would be important.
Yeah, if not,
and that was the appeal to me of this
if not,
group.
we're just wasting time.
I really agree with that.
I mean, otherwise that makes no sense to go jump into a new thing. So
I would agree with that as well.
Yeah. So I don't know who else we look. I mean, Joanne's the other one who comes to mind. I don't know.
Right.
If Pat Greco
I would think
does
she
it.
would be the only one, I
Or
guess,
Pat
that would
Greco.
be
I don't know if
tied
she do
around
this or no.
I'm not sure, but.
What was the name of the man who did Stoughton? Liz told me, and I had not heard of him before, but clearly that's another
Yeah, I
individual.
don't remember. But yeah, he would be involved, whoever it was. If he's still in the state, that wouldn't have been Keith Marty, right?
No, it wasn't Keith
Somebody
Marty,
else.
it was somebody else.
I don't know. Anyway, we'd have to ask. Okay, Jeff?
I would say about Studer, it's not just a couple people. I think it's a company-wide philosophy that mixes with us. And I agree we should look at what they do with Pewaukee, but you can't look at Pewaukee without also looking at Janesville, which they tout all over the website, and I think
And
Janesville's
some
a
private
mess.
stuff.
Right. But
And possibly-
they've been in Janesville for 5 to 10
Of course,
years.
right.
That's their test market. And I think it's gotten worse every year in Janesville. I think if you talk to people there, it's gotten worse every year.
And Studer has had less contact with Janesville in the last. I
Well,
mean,
then
their
maybe they should
their
divorce
main job
themselves.
was in the first 5 years, and now, because they're on their way, they're still working with it, but not as intensively as they
Except
were.
for the
So my point here is,
Right.
I don't know how much you can blame Studer for what went on there. I think you look at the community values, you look at the values on the board, and you've been to school board conventions, you know they're all over the board.
They're also
around
right,
the
yeah.
state. And you look at the superintendent and the staff, what their values are, that has, in my opinion,
agree.
a much bigger impact than whatever facilitator you bring in.
But they're also writing a book with the superintendent of
Correct, they
Janesville.
are.
So
Correct.
they are that much divorced from somebody who is probably, I wouldn't
That's
even
their
interview
longest
here. personally.
education experience, so
Right.
that would make sense, right?
Right. So I'm just saying,
Right. I got
you
it.
can't only give them the successes and not also look at the failures. But I'm not, so,
You're not finished, okay.
yeah. There's a couple things that bother me on the contract too. They talk focus groups and online surveys, no community meetings. And I don't think you can get a full thing with a focus group. There's nowhere it says community, it says stakeholder engagement opportunities and focus groups and create an online survey. I think focus groups can really be easily misled. I mean, a focus group gave us Mary Burke with the second option of Donald Drucker.
Focus.
But I'm seriously, no, it's just, I mean, focus groups can get you to say what you want them to say. And it also excludes people
Well, I guess I'm puzzled by your interpretation of a focus group. To me, you invite community people.
To me, you invite some community
Do you know how
people.
hard it is to get more than 20 community people to show up at something?
Well,
I mean, that's a
We
focus
should,
group.
we
Not
should let him
tonight.
have,
Okay, go ahead.
let him have a community meeting and see how many people.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
The
I mean,
chair should
that's-
not be.
No, all I'm saying is when I read focus groups, I read what you're talking about, a community meeting. Because I call that a focus group, and you're not gonna get more than.
For me, a
10.
focus group is you invite a few people and they get to sit down with the
Okay,
person.
well, that's a good question to ask them. Okay, go ahead. finish.
But a community meeting says, it's gonna be at 8 o'clock at this place. You
Right.
show up if you wanna show up, or don't show up if you don't wanna show up. But that's how I read a focus group in a community meeting, so.
And that's a really important point, and I think it is clear, again, we would decide that, who, how, when. The other thing that I guess I should have made clear, my fault, you see the word draft on this? Okay, all this stuff is negotiable as well. And so I've taken a lot of notes based on the feedback, so that if we do approve,
And
we'll make some adjustments.
And also, the online surveys, which I don't know, I would put a lot of stake in it. We got a lot of really nice charts and graphs from their online survey with us, and I don't think it could have been more broad. I think to really do a strategic plan, you need to get down to the nuts and bolts of what you really want, not A, B, and C, because A, B, and C only covers this much of this. So if I worry about them putting a lot of stock in an online survey, but if you're in Florida without an employee in Wisconsin, I think you're, and Susan Manning actually talks, I am not a consultant person, but I see the need for a consultant here. I just think Studer is the absolute wrong one for us.
Jean?
Would it be possible to suggest, I think you've heard a lot of ideas on involvement, participation, and alternative thing. I read from this group that we want the strategic plan, we want it Baldridge driven, and I think
One more, outside consultant, neutral.
Outside consultant,
Seven.
neutral, that doesn't carry this kind of baggage with it, and I would suggest, and Madam Chair, if you think it's in order, I would suggest we table this and ask Dan.
Postpone, don't say table.
Okay, well.
Well, let's wait for the formal
All right,
motion, then we can worry about
I'm
the
just saying,
wording.
don't get me
I don't
started.
need a lawyer right now,
Right.
but I would suggest that
You might,
that we
dear.
postpone it, deal with it another time, do what you want, shelve it, forget about it. But I do think you have a commitment from the board that we need a strategic plan, as you have envisioned. And I think we need one that has measurables in it, and I think that we would like to get away from the liability that Studer brings to us, and perhaps find someone else for it. And could we come back in 2 weeks and with an alternative proposal?
We'd be talking January, but yeah.
I mean, I'm
So are you asking, so you would like Dan to investigate the possibility of getting one of these other superintendents that we've talked about?
Sure.
I mean, I assume it's not gonna, I don't even know if Brenda Clark and Matthew Kaler are still doing this, but they're not gonna be cheaper, and I.
Way too expensive.
I mean, they're way more expensive.
I'm not a
than
big
this.
fan.
And I'm not, I wouldn't necessarily suggest we go there again either. So I think finding another Baldridge consultant, but you would like to see a comparison of if there's another, like a Joanne Sternke or somebody like that available by comparison is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, that's what that doesn't exclude you from getting coaching later on.
I was going to say, also maybe if we were to do that, I guess I could be in favor of that. If we are to do that with maybe a couple of goals in mind. One would be if we could find like a Joanne Sternke to do that, or a second, better yet, maybe we still do go with the student group, but maybe that gives you a bit of time to communicate and sell this to, to the stakeholders, so to speak, so that we can maybe get them more in line or more on board with what we want to try to do.
Yeah, you said it better than I did, but it's the same thought. I think it would be helpful to make it very clear, and maybe we do want a motion on that piece, that the board currently supports trying to build a strategic plan, and we can even say by June 30th, which would push us to take the time to come back and seriously look at a consultant. I'm not saying we have to do that, I'm just throwing those ideas out. But one, agree and have consensus on the building a strategic plan that's critical, and that impacts every single person in a school district, and that's important, and we're committed to that. And two, that we're accepting the idea that we do need an outside consultant who will give us the processes we've asked for, and that is exactly what we've talked about. And I bet Joyce says it in the minutes, and that's, you could probably pick the top 3 things: focus groups, surveys,
community meetings.
Yeah, whatever. And we don't have to be that specific, but each of the groups that we may do further investigation on could bring forward their 4 major points of what they want to do. And as Lionel said, we may look at those and say, you know what, guess what? This group is most experienced. We don't know. But board policy kind of encourages us, even though you don't need our approval for under the amount, you do need to do some other stuff. And one of them is to kind of show us that you looked at other groups, which you've done, but it kind of talks about a little more detail on that piece. So maybe just generally going back and saying, let's just do full due diligence so that we can look our community in the face and say, we did due diligence on this.
Would another criteria maybe be time frame? Because it's also possible that one of these other people would be available, but not till like April or something. I mean, I'm just, because there aren't that many of them in the state. You know, if you're looking for somebody who's Baldrige trained, who's a third-party consultant, if we're agreeing to that, who can get it done in this time frame, that may also limit our options. But so it seems to me that would be another important piece, because it does make sense to me to have this done by June, so that teachers, you know, people who work over the summer in their various groups.
And I would add,
and then in the fall.
I would just say bring back a more local area focused group, because it could be somebody, you know, who's lived here all their life, who's retired, or somebody that, you know, who's only worked in Wisconsin but lives over here for this reason. I don't think we should limit that. I think this is kind of like us asking for comparables.
The important thing about the Baldrige, though, Susan, is that to keep the language and the terminology and that.
Right, and I think that's going to limit who is available. That's all I'm saying. But I think that's important, because we've been committed to that now for several years, and I don't think we want to backtrack. So, and come up with new systems. So this to me is furthering the same system, but doing the same thing we did last time, but doing it better. That's what this really is. Yeah. But if we need to take more time and talk to more people, I mean, if I'm hearing a consensus, I guess I don't want to feel like we're forcing something either. I think one of the downsides is once people get misinformation and they get locked into their positions based on that misinformation, it's very hard to do anything that's going to persuade them.
I don't think I had misinformation. No,
I'm talking about more people we've gotten emails from and that kind of thing. I think there was some significant misinformation there, because very consistently I heard, outside group, going to write a plan for you. Why would you do that? We have the expertise here. Because I think there was not a real understanding of what this process is and how this works and how a facilitator can help and how the facilitators have helped. So I think we're still going to be up against some of that same thing no matter who we hire, because it's about the process. So I think the other piece is, Dan, I mean, when Dan asked them for guidance, I don't think he said necessarily how many. They say no more than 8 here. That's their suggestion. I think if he went back and said, you know, I might like to make that number 10 or 11 or 12, because maybe I want to include these people. I mean, I think we've given him some guidance to go back and think more about who we might want on that committee. And maybe he wants more definition of focus groups to meet your concern. I mean, maybe, you know, that's stuff we could flesh out with Studer and get kind of another draft proposal from them with some of that spelled out, in addition to a proposal from maybe one other superintendent who could, would that make sense?
Well, let me just say, the conversation with them about that specifically, they don't care. Yeah.
Right.
I get to decide.
That's right.
I was kind of thinking out loud about, okay, here's who might be on the committee. Sure, you can do this. They don't care. You know, we hire them to, you know, do what we want them to do.
Right.
So I guess I can bring you another proposal from someone else who's Baldrige trained. So I think we need to, I guess I'd like a commitment. If you want someone else, fine, then I'll go get someone else. I can come back in 2 weeks, you're gonna have Studer, you're gonna have someone else, so, you know, what do you want?
So what's the point of having someone else, is what you're saying? I mean,
Well,
are you saying I guess if the concern of the board is that we can't go with Studer because there's too much negative feeling among the staff, that's kind of what I'm hearing. I'm not hearing that there's necessarily a lack of confidence in them. So then
I don't think they're giving us much either for the money, but.
So then you're saying, okay, get a real proposal from another person who's Baldrige trained, lay out a similar kind of thing. What would you do what kinds of groups would you establish? How would you get this community and staff input? What would be, how would you work with the committee? Go through the whole thing just like this, and what would you charge for it? So we can compare the costs and compare what that would be. I mean, I think that's kind of what I'm hearing people ask for, Jessica.
Yeah, I think that you're probably right about that. And I think that you're also right in getting a feeling that maybe the majority of people aren't necessarily against Studer per se,
Right.
but, you know, undertaking this type of strategic planning, Peter said we're at least one step down the ladder already. And I think that we're starting out on such a bad footing that it might be better to go back and see if there are other
just to compare
options as well. Yeah. But I do want to say that, I don't have any problem working with consultants on this issue. I think that we should. And I think that our work in dealing with consultants and many other things that we've worked on, which you detailed tonight yourself, their expertise has been absolutely invaluable. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely made our work more efficient, better, more accurate, and very beneficial to our district. So, but I think just for whatever reason, we're here right now and we need to figure out how to make this situation better. But the point that I actually did want to make, though, is that I think that it would be good for us to sit down and think, how did we get to this point with this type of misinformation that has kind of created this storm and on this issue? How can we do this better the next time? How can we preemptively kind of head this off at the pass? Because clearly there has been, we could have done a better job.
Yeah, I've thought about that, and I'm not sure. I think there's much we could have done differently that would come out with the result. I don't think there would.
You don't?
Because you can go online and find nasty blogs about whatever you want, and that's I don't know. I'm just not sure. But I think at this point it would be helpful to do some more investigating. I guess my personal reluctance is I really like the idea of working with them on this very limited basis to see what we could get from them, to see whether they were people I'd like to work with. And I have a little harder time now thinking of hiring somebody different, and then we have to look at this group again, and we won't have worked with them, so we won't know we'd be making a bigger long-term commitment. So that's something I still want to kind of think about, which isn't to say we might not end up back with them after we get this other proposal. So we can kind of weigh that. It just puts it off, and that's not a terrible thing. I mean, it puts us into January instead of starting now. Peter and then Jeff.
Just to move this along then, I think from what I hear the board, let's just agree to come back with this in 2 weeks, or in first meeting in January, and with an alternative proposal that we can compare.
Would we
that is,
give us a choice?
Would we
at least give us something to look at and give us a choice? Yeah.
Would we want to potentially make that an action meeting? And I'm just asking this because otherwise we wouldn't take action to the end of January. That sets us back an entire month in the process, which if we want to end up in June, it's... So unless
Studer wasn't going to start till February.
Good point.
Well, right, but if we hire somebody at the end of January, then maybe they're not going to start till March. That's what I'm saying. They got that lead time to prepare, so they clearly expected a month to prepare. So, or it might mean we have an extra meeting or something we can say. We'll wait and see what the information looks like. So,
you keeping up with all this, guys?
Jeff, did you have something else to say?
I think we should.
I think we do have a consensus.
I think we should hire a facilitator, not a consultant. And I see them different. A facilitator is going to help us come up with our strategic plan. A consultant is going to help consult with us on our strategic plan. I think there's a difference. I
Absolutely.
think
And
we're
you need to
making
be
a difference.
clear, if we
Yeah.
hire Studer, they are a facilitator for this
Facilitator.
process.
And I also think that,
Tomato.
I also think that if we do go with another person, and I don't speak for anybody, but I think it would be perceived as a compromise where we could get people behind it more than if we went with Studer.
Possibly.
So
I'm not
what
sure
type
I-
of-
I'm not sure I think that's.
What type
possible.
of direction do we, what kind of action can we take right now
Well, I
to?
don't think we necessarily have to take it.
You'll
I
have
think
another
Dan's,
proposal
I think Dan's
in
willing to have
January.
another proposal, and I think,
So
I
do we
think,
need to make a motion?
no, we don't need to do anything,
don't
because
need
I
to.
think
Nothing on the
Dan's
table.
already got
Yeah.
some consensus and some thoughts to build in. And we'll see, and we'll just come back with another, I think maybe this one tweaked to represent some of the comments, and then maybe another one from another party, assuming you can find someone who can do that.
So is Studer considered dead or on hold?
No, they're on hold.
They're on pause.
I personally would like to see this come back with Dan having given more thought to who it involved and change, if we wanted to add community meetings to focus groups. I mean, some of the stuff that we talked about could be put in here, and I think Dan was taking notes. And I think, so this will come back and maybe look a little different.
But like he said, though, that's not etched in stone.
No, it isn't.
That's
It
not,
was a draft.
I mean, we make that however we want it to look.
Right.
I mean, they're just gonna, I don't know.
But I seem to be hearing from
We
Dean.
can't let that be a determining factor.
No, it isn't, but there were some people who felt like they wanted a little more stuff fleshed out here. I don't know. I think that we just have to,
I guess my fear, and I don't want to get bogged down because I've been in these meetings before,
Right.
where they're not good enough, we're going to bring somebody back, they're not going to be good enough, and before long, we're going to be in June, still sitting there with our, wondering,
Well, there is some-
what we're going to do.
yeah, I mean, there's a
So-
downside to putting it off,
Yeah.
but I think
There's
we
also
should-
an upside, you can fail,
Yeah, it
you
could
can
always be
fail
an
in
upside.
January and succeed in June.
It's a possibility, but,
Yes, it's.
well, whatever we got to do to move on.
Yeah.
No, I think
Can I
we have.
suggest we take a break?
Rush
Oh,
through
can
it.
I just
That's
ask one?
a good idea.
I just have one quick question, and that is, did I just understand, I just want to clarify, that there are some mild changes, because this is a draft, that we would like to see in the Studer proposal before that comes back as a choice with another option? Some clarity, and we kind of just talked about that.
Some
You were
very
taking
mild
a-
things, yeah.
No,
I mean, yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
Things
I
like
think
Dan has that.
Pretty much,
Okay.
I would expect that the plan from this, let's say we get somebody like a Joanne Sternke, I would expect her plan's gonna look a lot like this, because this is the process. I mean, that's what this is. So it's not gonna look very different. So it's more a matter of, does she have the time? Would she take us through the same process? What would she charge us?
Right.
Or if she's not available,
Well,
somebody
I don't
else.
know, I think that's a big price for very little, very little
Well,
service.
given that we paid
Well,
more than
50,000
3 times
Well,
that last time.
but-
Just because we did that once, and then we should do
Because
it
you
I don't-
bought, you bought a bad apple
Well,
then.
no, we didn't,
No, we
because of
didn't.
that, and that's not even fair to
No, that's
compare.
not
So
right.
Well,
that's-
you're the one that's complaining.
No, I'm not complaining, I'm just saying, we actually
don't.
got more from them
Break.
because they
Break.
continued to
Let's
work
take
with
a
us for an entire year after
I
that,
think
so.
they're
It's time for break.
They were fine.
So are we going to be set at just bringing one back, or are we bringing multiple back? Or
I'll-
what are we doing?
I plan on just one. I mean,
Yeah,
they're gonna do the same work.
right.
So you're gonna get
It's
a
just a
choice
good-
between this group or an
So you're going to
individual,
look,
It's just
first
a-
of all, you're going to look into people.
whoever's
getting-
available.
A Baldrige trained
I've
person
got 4
doesn't
names
work
written
for
down right
Studer.
now that I'll call, and
Yeah.
hopefully one of them will be
But
available.
what if all 3 of them are?
Then we'll come back with Studer, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Outside
It was-
Wisconsin, I guess.
Well, and we can talk with
I'm
them.
not,
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to going outside of Wisconsin. I
Yeah.
don't see where
Well, I
this should
think,
be
I
eliminated.
think that shouldn't be as big a deal as
Should
it
be a
is,
limiting thing.
because because one of the things with Studer is they work with other districts, so they're coming into the state periodically anyway. They do a lot of work by phone. It's the same thing when you work with somebody who's in a different city in Wisconsin. And that was, by the way, one of the inaccuracies about Neola as a contractor. Yeah, they're basically based in Ohio, but the consultant that we work with, Neola, lives in Wisconsin, is a former Wisconsin superintendent. The law firm they work with on the policies is a Wisconsin law firm, steeped in school law. They have an office in Madison, office in Brookfield. So yes, technically the corporation is Ohio, but the workers that we're working with are in Madison.
Oh, yeah.
And similar with, this kind of thing. I mean, I think we have to be careful about, I'm a little sensitive to this
Yeah.
out of state,
Yeah.
out of the
Yeah.
district,
Yeah.
because that's,
And
To me, not necessarily an issue.
And also with Studer, her comments earlier, Studer is education-based. I mean, they're retired superintendents usually.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's not that they don't know anything about education, so.
And I think that's a really important point, you know, is concerned that while the Studer Education's been a corporation for 4 years, the people working with them are lifelong educators.
Can we take
you
a
know.
2-minute break?
We're
Right.
taking more than 2.
Yeah, we'll take at least 5. All right, thank you.
Where'd everybody go?
Nobody wants to hear the rest of it.
Apparently Elvis has left the building.
All right, we are back in session, and the next item on the agenda is we're back to new business, so the discussion of proposed WSB delegate assembly resolutions. And Peter, I'm going to turn that over to you.
I apologize. I prepared an email with my thoughts about it, and then I just discovered it in my drafts folder instead of having been sent to Joyce. So, and what I did was I took all of the copious feedback I got on the WASB resolutions from all of you. You know who you are.
Yeah. I ran that off. I have 3 pages of it.
And
I had fun writing burlesque at some of those.
yes, and put together a proposition to support and oppose, and it's up on the board in front of you. Most of these are not controversial, you know.
What is?
Well, so I've made this proposal with 4 that would oppose. The 2, 1504 and 1517 are alternative pathways to teacher certification, essentially, related to that. And then 1510 is taking certain decisions, it's technical, taking certain decisions out of the hands of the Boundary Appeal Board. And 12 is there's a statute that provides tenure for a few older teachers in Milwaukee. And they have an alternative tenure statute that I know almost nothing about. But other than that, I would propose supporting the other resolutions. Does anybody have any comments or something they would like moved from column A to column B?
You
or vice
would vote
versa?
yes on all of them, but which one?
The ones on the bottom, before 10, 12, and 17.
Those are all the ones you wanted to vote no on, Dean. so-
That's right, exactly.
Are they?
Yes, like I said, I
No,
collated all the
You
feedback.
have very good judgment.
Right.
Well, some of them are silly. A lot
Yes.
of them are
They usually all are, most of them.
Yeah, I don't know much about the boundary appeal one. I'll trust your judgment on that, Dean. The rest of them I agreed with you with, that we should not support. The Milwaukee one, I kind of wished I could talk to a Milwaukee board member to see what if they had
one's
some
that one?
thoughts about that. The one about repealing
15,
the,
12.
12 about
Populous counties.
the populous counties and their tenure system.
You know, the comment I always have when people bring up tenure, the school districts in this country that have the most problems, our inner city school districts with the poorest performance, typically have 50% per year teacher turnover. You know, tenure's not the problem. I mean, retention is the problem that they have.
So I guess what I was saying is I don't know what the background of why this was brought up, where it came from, because I assume it came from somewhere. If the WSB was, so I was wondering if it came from Milwaukee and they had specific reasons. But if you, I don't know, I'd be comfortable with saying vote no, but if you hear arguments to persuade you otherwise.
This is all has to be, this is just our suggestion to the legislature, right?
That's right.
Right.
So anything the next 2 years, this is teacher tenure, will not pass.
This
In the
will pass, because this is getting rid of it.
Oh, okay.
Is what this resolution is doing. And that's why I thought it was an interesting resolution. I would have liked to hear the Milwaukee boards, or whoever proposed it. I don't know who proposed it, So what I'd be comfortable with is what you've done in the past, is that our inclination is that you'd probably vote no on these 4, but if you hear some compelling reason to vote differently, that we would trust your judgment. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I put together a motion.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if we've done that.
Oh, okay.
Next page, please, which is
This is too high.
which means it's a recommendation to me to support them, to support the resolutions, which means I don't
As presented, meaning you would only support the ones that, you wouldn't support these ones we
That's
don't
right.
know on.
I would
Okay.
support it as presented.
How about
Could we say, Monona
with
Grove
flexibility?
recommends, yeah,
Well, that's why I
designated
use, that's why I use recommends.
We could just, yeah, as presented, or use his judgment to vote otherwise.
doesn't follow
I'd like
exactly.
to give you the authority to vote the way you think you should.
Which is why, like I said, which is why I use recommends. That way I
Oh,
have,
okay,
that way I
gotcha.
can
I
say
gotcha.
I have the
Okay.
backing of the board,
Okay.
but it
that
is a
makes-
recommendation,
that
I
makes
can change
sense.
it.
All right, so, somebody wanna make that motion?
Monona Grove Board of Education recommends that the designated WASBA delegate support the WASBA 2015 resolutions as presented.
Tonight, as presented here, because we're not presenting it the
Can
way
I
they
amend that
presented it,
by
because they're
if you
presenting
don't
all.
Follow our recommendations?
Yes.
All right.
So, okay, so is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Heck of a good job, thank you.
Opposed?
Stunning.
All right.
This is
The
table.
motion carries. Then we are on to discussion regarding funding of the teacher compensation plan. And Dan, I'll let you.
Sure. And this is on for discussion. You know, as you know, Dean reported on his committee report, we're getting close to having something. I think the goal is to have a plan to bring to the board in January, not for approval, but for that, you know, a good update of where we're at. And so we're in the process of looking at the salary recommendations. We don't have a dollar amount as far as, you know, remember, we wrote the plan, or we're writing the plan with the idea that we can incorporate it regardless of what our funding is. But clearly, I think, well, I don't say, I shouldn't speak for everyone. I'll speak for myself, and the discussion at the committee that the salaries, we need to do something with teacher salaries. Okay. And so, so the model will be flexible enough that we certainly will identify key teachers that we think are, I'll use the term underpaid, and with the idea of, you know, retention, that we need to do something, and so at some point it will take some additional revenue to find a way in order to not necessarily fund the plan, but to have a salary structure that we think is needed in order to retain our staff. So with that, you know, Peter suggested that we have a discussion about that at this time before we start the budget planning process and other opportunities for revenue in the future. Be careful of those, our words. So with that.
Peter?
What I'm thinking here, well, in particular, when we're talking about the new teacher compensation plan, we do want to maintain our current commitments, which means not moving people backwards. Which means that there will be transitional costs, and I don't know exactly how much these will be. There will be transitional costs because people will be out of place on the plan from where they would be if they had evolved naturally of the plan in the usual fashion. And the discussion I want to have is, does that present us an opportunity to go to the community to fund that? And in the end, if we're doing that, it helps, you know, put a few more dollars in the teachers' pockets, because we have had some issues in the last several years with funding of this district, and to pile on top of that with a new compensation plan where we don't quite have enough money to fund the transition may make it a little more difficult to implement the plan, and it certainly is going to make it financially more difficult. And I wanted to bring this up because I'm wondering about what people feel, what the thoughts are.
Anybody have any thoughts? Personally, I think it's hard to talk about until we know what kind of money we're talking about, but.
Well, I think Dan, you and Jared could add, to remind us that the salaries that we offer for next year will be based on their current salary plus whatever is added, right?
Correct.
That every teacher will be in, there will be no teacher in the master teacher or distinguished teacher category. And only the TOSAs that we approve would be, and we've created additives for those. So this plan will not go into effect in its full blossom next.
That's going to be the recommendation.
Yeah, that's the recommendation
Yeah.
that will come to you.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do would be to begin some adjustments, preliminary transition, let me put it that way, within step 1, 2, and 3, right? Am I hitting that right? And the master teacher will have to go, next year will be the process in which teachers will apply to be in the master teacher category, or perhaps the distinguished. Maybe we want to hold that one off for a year or two, but it's we'll have to see where the categories are. But I think we want to make that master teacher category a substantial type of thing, if we can. And that may be a transition goal, and not be able to be doing it, because I think the goal is to try to make that the attractive repository, isn't it, of our best teachers.
Will we have any of those numbers tomorrow night at the meeting? Or?
Yes, you will.
Okay, so we'll start to have an idea, because I just think it's hard until we know the magnitude of what kind of dollars we need to think about how we pay for it, because we talked about possibly the fund balance. That might be okay with me, depending on the amount. We talked about doing some different possibilities. So I just think it's hard, and I know, anyway, Peter?
I'll just throw out a hypothetical. Let's say that we have a transitional cost. It'll be for several years of approximately $300,000 a year. I'm not going to say where I got that number from, Jared. But no. I mean, I know that was. I asked Jerry. He said, "Give me just total guesstimate." So we're not going to hold anybody to that number, but just sort of as a hypothetical. That's, and I can see looking at the numbers and so on that might be sort of the kind of money we're talking about, just in comparison. So if you were just going to hypothetically say it's $300,000, then what would you consider for appropriate revenue? Appropriate way to source of revenue to fund that.
I guess.
Because what I think over three years or so, it's $1 million or thereabouts.
Well, it becomes
if it's a lot lower,
it becomes ongoing because the salaries are going to be higher. So
no, I don't think so. I think the problem is that you're going to have in the long term the scale will be set, and I think it can be set in a revenue neutral fashion. In the short term, because nobody's going to move backwards. We're going to keep everybody whole. That gives you a difference over where you would be over the long term, and that's the transitional cost.
Well, it's pretty clear we're not going to get any more money from the state.
It's pretty clear we're not going to get any more money from the state.
I think it's very likely we're not going to see revenue limit increases, so we might be looking at what we have now. So it's hard until we get all that. I mean, we're going to be strapped, I think.
I was going to say, we were talking about.
So I think we have to really think about, okay, if we fund this, if we pulled it temporarily even out of fund balance, what does that mean exactly for us going forward? And I think we're going to have to look at all that. And it's very hard without having more clear numbers to know what to do with that. And I know, if you were ever going to go to the public and ask if they'd pay for that, I think the timing's not going to be good for doing that this fast, because we aren't going to have enough of that in-depth knowledge, I think, soon enough, given the timelines. And then you had to lay the groundwork, and we haven't done that. But anyway, Susan?
Well, it would seem to me that, I appreciate that Peter brought that forward, because, again, the surprise stuff tends to make us a little, we muddle a little bit more. And so the more we know, the more we have to think about, the better able we are to plan. But it seems to me like you're building a structure. If you follow the model that we used with the retirement plan to the extent that you can, and you take each teacher, just like you did with the retirement plan, and you run it and you say, okay, this person is going to, this is what you're telling me, that you should be able to fit where a teacher is going to be and see what their salary currently is and see whether or not there's a change. We should be able to financially see the picture. And one of the things Jared did for us before with the retirement plan, which was really, really helpful, is what's your financial pool available? So maybe for the first 2 years, if you've got this category up here that pays more money and needs more funding, that we can't implement that for 2 years. You know, maybe that's where we get. But if you follow that model and you ask the question, what's available? What does this plan anticipate the needs to be? And then you can see whether or not there's a gap. Then you guys, like we did with the retirement committee, you can sit down and say, okay, this isn't going to work, you know, and then give us several options for places where the funding could come from that's sustainable. So the general fund could be great for next year or the next year, but maybe it isn't for the third year. Yeah. So it's got to be sustainable. So again, if you look at that model, again, what's the pool, what's available, what can you make available? What will this plan require generally, and how much change is there going to be? And then we can look at whether or not it's feasible.
Well, that's
Exactly.
that's kind of what we're saying, I think. But
I think we also have to look at our long-term building thing, because we don't want
Right.
to do a referendum for $1 million now and then next year come up for more. And we
Yeah, I
got to
think
make sure that we all work together in sync on that.
I think that's a very significant factor. Well, we may be looking, for all we know, we may be looking at a general operational referendum too. That's not entirely out of the picture, given the financial picture of the state.
Right.
And in that case, we could possibly roll this into
Right.
that. So I think there are too many ifs to
Right.
have that discussion right now, but.
Yeah, that was going to be one of the things I was going to suggest, because I know we're talking about, if we're looking at long-range facilities planning, you don't want to go next year and then all of a sudden we're coming behind it saying, oh yeah, by the way, we need, you know, this extra money for facilities, you know, in the near future. So it gets to be a little tricky there.
I think that's true. Peter?
Going to the public, just so you know, there's no fall election next year.
Right.
I'm just one of these, the reason I want to bring this discussion forward is because we have the April election coming up with deadlines in January. And then the next election opportunity is the following spring, is a year from then. There's no fall
Right.
election.
Right.
So it means putting it off, I think, for at least a year. I want to have that discussion. And I don't know if the budget will bear that if we start to implement next year. And we have significant transition costs.
I think
To be honest, my feeling is that this is a good opportunity. It's a good subject to go to the voters on, because people will perceive it as we're looking at making, you know, positive changes in the district. I think it would align with what the public thinking on the issue, and it would also advertise what we're doing as a district. And so I think it's, like I said, I think it's a good opportunity to do it.
If we were to do a fall referendum, when would we need to come up with that?
Well, it's 70 days before the elections.
Yeah.
But there is no
But there is no fall
fall
election.
election. You'd
So
have
it'd
to do a special
election,
election.
which is more costly, but.
Yeah, which is.
I guess I think the timing of these things is sufficiently important that I don't want to jump into something before we're ready to and have the groundwork laid and feel it's appropriate just because there's not an election for a year. I think if we decided, I think we'd have to roll that into our consideration of the final plan and what we thought we could take out of the fund balance to fund it. I mean, we'd have to be very careful and think, okay, if we did this with the thought of going to the public and that didn't work, where would that leave us?
Yeah, exactly.
And we have to look at all those, you know, I think
there's
it'd be
too many
nicer
variables out
there
there.
are too many variables, and I think given that we pretty much know we're gonna be going for some kind of building.
But I think the alert that
Right.
Peter's giving us has to be in the back of our minds, because we don't know how we don't know what the legislature's gonna do. We don't know really what we're gonna do right now on this. And so it's, that's why I've always been a little concerned that these would pile up. You know, we have to watch our borrowing.
Well, I'm glad we've done the refinance. I mean, Jared's really been on top of that and has done an excellent job, and I think it's a good thing because it's going to serve us well now.
Because our our committee is supposed to be done end of June, so we should hopefully have,
Right, so
and that'll be here in no time, really. I mean, So, I mean, it's just that, I mean, I understand that, I agree that we need to watch that, but in just a few months.
I think we need more information, and we have to have the total context, I guess. Unfortunately, I mean, I think you're right, Peter, it'd be great if we could know something more now, but, so we can consider it. I just feel like we'd be shooting in the dark.
I think the heads up is important, though.
Right, well, I think that's true.
Absolutely.
Right.
Could I just raise one point on the facilities committee? If any of you have a couple of names of people, Monona and Cottage Grove, with kids in school who might want to serve on the committee like that, could make a contribution, it might be good, yes?
I just, sorry to interrupt you, Jean. Do you specifically want people who have kids in school, or perhaps if they
Well, the
had
only
kids in
criticism
school?
I have indirectly from a couple of people already appointed was, maybe we need one or two more with, at least one more, I think we maybe need that.
I know you're gonna say we're off agenda, right?
What?
Never mind, go ahead.
No.
What were you gonna say?
No,
'Cause we
I
kind of
appreciate
are.
that you asked
Yeah.
that, because I looked at that committee and I thought, oh, no. You know, again, it didn't feel quite as comprehensively.
We are kind of distinctly off agenda.
Yes.
we are.
Not kind
I
of,
think
we
I hope
are.
you can have this conversation
Yeah, we
outside
will.
of the meeting.
But I
Yeah.
appreciate that he brought
Right.
that back up and reminded us.
It was mentioned during the report, so we can talk about it again after.
Yes, right.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, so, do we have any more on funding the compensation plan, or we pretty much said that? I mean, I think, it sounded like, the consensus I'm getting is that we're not gonna put it on the agenda as, for any kind of action item in January.
Which one?
Which is where
No,
they were,
it's,
the funding and teacher,
oh,
it was just
our
for initial
intention is to put
discussion.
it on for information.
Just to make sure people knew
Right.
there's gonna be a
Yes,
cost there.
for the, yes.
Perfect, okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So then, future agenda items, anything else that people are aware of that we don't, or want to bring up as a future agenda item?
Did we, so I think, I appreciate you mentioning tonight that it's, if there's reports or information that we're kind of looking for, this would be a good time to do that. And school improvement reports,
These are on your calendar.
I'm not saying next month, I'm just saying, if we put that on the list, then that would be
Yeah.
nice to have that come up.
I should have another name.
What happened to all those other items we had?
Well, remember, we just said Dan was going to send out again that year-long agenda, so you'll see where all those reports are, just as a reminder. Again.
I did leave on there the ones that are not scheduled, as well as the ones that are, so I didn't delete anything from the
So
list.
if you see things that are missing, we'll send
So
those.
without seeing that, I guess I have no idea
Sure.
what to
Right.
mention
Okay.
for
Right.
future
That-
agenda.
yeah,
But don't
okay.
make the board pick out which ones when. You
Yeah.
pick them
No, he'll
out
do that.
and let us pick out the exception.
Right.
Actually, a
Yeah.
bunch of those, several of those, some of the ones I had specifically asked for have been presented. In the student achievement report, and so, if you take that list of.
Well, it's all
including-
done by month, so you'll be able to go
Yeah.
through it and see that.
That'd be great.
And it's up to date.
But it should be determined more by their work cycle and
Yeah.
information
It
cycle.
is, and that's why it's appropriate for them to,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so future meeting nights, tomorrow night. Actually, before, and.
What?
Tomorrow night. No, I mean for our teacher compensation committee. Next board meeting will not be until January 14th.
And regarding meetings, those of you on the personnel committee meeting, we had set a tentative date. That date is not going to work, so I don't have an alternative date at this point, but we'll contact you by email and we'll.
Which tentative date, the one we talked about tonight?
January, another meet and
The
confer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
14th, I
January-
believe, or
I'm getting
16th.
meetings mixed up, I guess.
15th it was.
15th.
Yeah, so that one.
Oh, I see, that's on here, yeah. Okay,
So-
So
so
can we-
you'll get back to them on that, and then the
Right.
policy committee will meet on
Yeah,
January 7th.
can we,
so.
can we do this, so,
Yep.
like we have December 18th dash teacher compensation at district office dash 5:30. It's hard to tell
That's
where,
just in there, I think.
what? I can't,
Well, if you open it up in board docs, it's all listed in the list.
oh, great, okay. So is the policy committee tentatively scheduled for January 7th?
Yes.
Right, at 6:30.
That's January 14th.
No.
No, January 7, policy committee at district office,
There's
6:30.
a screen, look up on the screen. That might
Okay.
help you.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
you're
then
right.
January
I got it.
14th
I got
is the
it.
committee of
Thank
the
you.
whole, that's the
When you
usual.
get a chance, I did send you an email with
Yes.
the draft
I
agenda,
saw that.
so we
Great.
can talk about
Perfect.
that.
It's the regular
Super.
schedule, right.
Super.
And So it would be January 14th that we would revisit the strategic plan issue, and then that might be potentially action, because it's pretty late to do it. That's the one, with January 28th would be pushing pretty
That's
late.
late.
So we would hopefully be able to have some action on the 14th. All right, then we initially had planned to go back into closed session. I guess I'm wondering if people would rather, we know we'll have a closed session again on January 14th, if you would rather conclude the conversation we were having at that time, or do you want to try to go in briefly now? I'm just looking for some consensus.
Why don't
It's 10 o'clock.
Yeah, just do
And
it,
Dan's been
man. Do
traveling
it
all
later.
Do it later.
And could we maybe make it more, hour and a half as opposed to an hour, or?
Should, you know, if we knew we were gonna have a short enough regular agenda, I mean, we could do it afterwards, but we never know, and then it gets late.
Right.
I guess I'd rather do
Start
it
at like
before.
Start at
Yeah, 5:30 as opposed to.
5:30
That's a
instead of-
great
Okay.
idea.
5:30 is very hard for me to
Jeff
come.
can
And
never
don't
hour
put,
open.
and try not to put other closed
That's
session.
just the one item.
do this thing.
Yeah.
That
Well,
would
we
be
know
perfect.
next
why
time
we
we might
have
have
6
to
o'clock.
close
You never know.
Well,
There could
but
be
then we,
something
if
else.
it's only an hour,
Right.
we get to the same town.
Right.
It's got
So 5:30.
hour and a half, 2 hours of stuff.
Okay,
we're trying to
so-
squeeze into an hour.
Fabulous.
So we probably will have closed session
You're just
on
gonna
January
do-
14th, and it may be 5:30 or
Yeah.
6, so at least be 6. So, okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So, second. Third.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye. For that.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right.